What if the crying, stuttering kid everyone loved was actually a 300-year-old war criminal wearing his smile like a fucking mask? What if All Might didn't train a hero, he armed a god? Forget everything you know about Deku. This is the story of the greatest betrayal in anime history.
Welcome, legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you have any suggestions or what-ifs you want to see, drop it in the comments below. Also, just wanted to let you know I've got a Patreon set up now for anyone who wants to support the channel directly. You can get early access to stories, submit direct fan requests, and get exclusive content. It's totally optional, but if you want to help keep these stories coming, check it out. Links in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Let's dive into this story.
The sludge villain's grip tightened around Izuku Midoriya's throat, cutting off air, drowning him in putrid ooze that tasted like sewage and rot. 14-year-old lungs burned. The world blurred at the edges, darkening, pulling him down into that familiar abyss where Sōsuke Aizen had died and been reborn. How tedious. The thought cut through the panic like a blade through silk. Izuku's eyes, genuinely terrified to any observer, calculated trajectories, absorption rates, crowd psychology. The sludge villain had chosen poorly. This body, this quirkless shell, had been conditioned for 14 years with Shinigami physiology hidden beneath trembling weakness. The suffocation was real, but survivable. The question was how to maximize the outcome. Bakugo Katsuki thrashed in the villain's other pseudopod, explosions popping uselessly against liquid mass. Predictable. The boy had never learned that brute force was the refuge of limited minds. Around them, pro-heroes hesitated, Backdraft's water would strengthen the villain, Kamui Wood's binding would slip through slime, Death Arms lacked range. The crowd of civilians watched, phones raised, recording their own helplessness. Perfect, Izuku's fingers twitched. He could end this in 3 moves. Bakudo Mer 61 to immobilize the villain's core. Hado Mer 31 to vaporize the construct. Shunpo to evacuate Bakugo before the explosion. 30 seconds, maximum. But then came the boom of displaced air, the flutter of a cape, and Japan's #1 hero landed in the street like a meteorite of hope and glory. Fear not, citizens, for I am here. All Might's smile could power cities. His mere presence made the crowd gasp with relief, made even the sludge villain hesitate. Izuku felt the hero's eyes sweep across the scene, cataloging threats, calculating rescue priorities. And in that microsecond, Izuku made his choice. He twisted his body just so, angling himself to appear more desperate, more helpless. He coughed strategically, expelling just enough slime to seem on the verge of unconsciousness. His hand reached out toward All Might in the universal gesture of a drowning victim grasping for salvation. The symbol of peace has a savior complex, Izuku thought, even as his vision legitimately darkened. Predictable. Texas smash! The shockwave turned the sludge villain into a rainstorm of organic matter. Izuku and Bakugo flew backward, expelled from their prison, hitting pavement hard enough to bruise. Real pain. Acceptable collateral for authenticity. When Izuku's eyes fluttered open, the first thing he saw was All Might's concerned face hovering above him, that smile now tinged with genuine worry. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Bakugo was already being tended to by paramedics, yelling about not needing help. "Young man, are you all right?" All Might's voice boomed with practiced cheer, but Izuku caught the undertone of concern. The hero actually cared. How exploitable, Izuku coughed, sitting up slowly. Yes, thank you, All Might." His voice cracked perfectly on the name, genuine awe mixing with calculated fanboy enthusiasm. Tears welled in his eyes, real tears triggered by controlled stress response. And "You saved us. You're so amazing. I knew you'd come. I just knew it." All Might's smile widened. He helped Izuku to his feet, one massive hand steadying the boy's shoulder. "Just doing my job, young man. Stay safe now." Then the hero turned to leave, now for the crucial moment. "Wait!" Izuku's hand shot out, grabbing All Might's leg. The hero paused, looking back in surprise. Izuku's face was a perfect mask of desperate hope. Tears streaming, eyes wide with fanatical devotion. "Please, All Might, I have to ask you something. It's important." Around them, the crowd murmured. The pro-heroes were securing the sludge villain's remains. Bakugo was being loaded into an ambulance, still complaining. All Might glanced at the journalists, the cameras, and Izuku felt the hero's discomfort. Good. Witnesses made lies more believable. I'm sorry, young man, but I really must. Can someone without a quirk become a hero? The question exploded from Izuku's throat with 14 years of manufactured anguish. He didn't let go of All Might's leg, couldn't let go because this moment was the foundation of everything. His shoulders shook, his voice broke. I don't have a quirk. I'm quirkless. But I want to save people. I want to save them with a smile, just like you. Is it possible? Can someone like me? All Might's expression shifted. The performative smile cracked, revealing something raw beneath. Pity. Understanding. The hero had been quirkless once too, Izuku knew. Before One for All. Before the symbol. He'd been weak, helpless, exactly like the crying boy clinging to his leg. Young man, All Might's voice softened. He knelt down, bringing himself to Izuku's eye level. The cameras captured it all. The mighty symbol of peace, genuinely moved by a quirkless boy's impossible dream. What's your name? Izuku Midoriya. The stutter came naturally, a habit perfected over 14 years of playing weak. Midoriya Shunin. All Might's smile returned, but different now. Warm. Fatherly. The answer to your question, it's not easy for someone without a quirk. The world is harsh, unfair, but he placed both hands on Izuku's shoulders. I believe you can become a hero. The crowd gasped. Journalists scribbled frantically. Izuku's eyes widened with genuine surprise, not at the answer, but at how quickly the hook had set. All Might's savior complex was even stronger than anticipated. Without a quirk, you'll have to work harder than anyone else. All Might continued, his voice gaining strength, conviction. You'll face rejection, mockery, pain, but if you have the heart of a hero, if you never give up on saving people with a smile, the symbol's eyes actually glistened with emotion. Then yes, Midoriya Shonen, you can become a hero. Izuku burst into tears. Real, cathartic tears triggered by the sheer perfection of this moment. He'd spent 14 years in this world, watching it from the outside with Aizen's detached analytical mind. 14 years wearing the mask of Deku, the useless boy, the crybaby, the victim. And now finally, the symbol of peace himself had validated that mask, breathed life into it, made it real in the eyes of the world. Thank you. Izuku sobbed, still clutching All Might's arms. Thank you so much. I'll work hard. I'll train. I'll become a hero who saves people with a smile, just like you. All Might pulled him into a hug, and the crowd awed, and the cameras flashed, and somewhere deep in the soul of Sōsuke Aizen, the man who had transcended death itself to be reborn in this strange world of quirks and heroes, something almost resembling satisfaction flickered. First piece, he thought, even as he hugged All Might back with trembling, grateful arms. The symbol of peace is mine, 10 months. All Might had given him 10 months to prepare his body for One for All, to prove himself worthy of inheriting the greatest quirk in history. 10 months to clean Dagobah Beach, to turn his quirkless, weak body into something capable of handling divine power. Izuku stood alone on the beach at dawn, staring at the mountain of trash that covered the sand like a monument to society's waste. Refrigerators, cars, washing machines, furniture, decades of illegal dumping that no one had bothered to clean. Perfect training, All Might had said. Build strength through labor. Prove dedication through persistence. The hero watched from a distance, sipping coffee, ready to offer encouragement and guidance. Ready to see his young protege struggle, fight, overcome through pure determination and heart, Izuku smiled. Then he grabbed a refrigerator with one hand and lifted it over his head. The appliance weighed at least 200 pounds. For a 14-year-old boy with no quirk, no enhancement, no special training, it should have been impossible. Should have required both hands, a dolly, leverage, something. Izuku held it one-handed like it was made of foam. Shinigami physiology, he thought, carrying the refrigerator toward the truck with casual ease. My spiritual body remembers strength that transcends flesh. This world's humans are fragile, limited by their biological constraints. But I am not human. I never was. He glanced back toward where All Might watched from the parking lot, still too far away to see details clearly through the morning haze. Izuku's expression went completely flat, eyes cold and calculating. Then he shifted his grip, pretended to stumble, and dropped the refrigerator with a crash. Ow! He grabbed his back, wincing dramatically. Too heavy. I need to Use both hands. He lifted the refrigerator again, this time with visible strain, grunting with effort, shuffling slowly toward the truck. Every movement was calculated, every groan calibrated to show struggle without showing failure. The performance of a weak boy desperately trying to become strong. By the time All Might jogged over, concerned by the noise, Izuku was red-faced and panting, leaning against the truck like he'd just run a marathon. Midoriya, Shunin, don't push yourself too hard on the first day. I'm okay, Izuku gasped, giving the hero his best determined smile. I can do this. I have to do this. All Might's expression softened with pride and concern. Your spirit is admirable, but pace yourself. We have 10 months. There's no need to... I want to make you proud. The words came out with perfect desperation, perfectly genuine sounding emotion. You believed in me when no one else did. I can't let you down. All Might actually took a step back, visibly moved. His hand went to his face, wiping at his eyes. My boy, you've already made me proud. Just keep going at your own pace. And a coughing fit seized him. Steam hissed from his body as he deflated into his true form, skeletal, hollow-eyed, the broken remains of a symbol held together by willpower alone. He hacked into his hand, blood speckling his palm. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Interesting. His injury is worse than publicly known. He's dying slowly, burning out like a candle. This world's symbol of peace is temporary, a placeholder keeping society from collapsing into chaos, and he wants me as his replacement. All Might, Izuku rushed over, genuine concern coloring his voice. Are you okay? Should I call someone? I'm fine. Toshinori Yagi, All Might's true form, waved him off, wiping blood from his mouth. Just pushed my time limit. My body took severe damage years ago. I can only maintain my hero form for a few hours a day now. That's why you need a successor, Izuku said softly, the pieces clicking together in a way that would seem natural, observant, rather than omniscient. You're training me not just to be a hero, but to replace you. Toshinori stared at him, surprised by the boy's insight. Then he smiled, a smaller, more human smile than All Might's billboard grin. You're perceptive. Yes, one for all must be passed on before I... He trailed off, the implication clear. Before I die, Izuku felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy, no sadness at the thought of this kind. Broken man fading away, but his face showed all three, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then I'll work even harder, Izuku said, voice trembling with manufactured emotion. So you can retire peacefully, knowing someone will protect the people you love. Toshinori's hand landed on Izuku's shoulder, gripping tight. Thank you, Midoriya Shonen. Thank you. That night, alone on the beach under moonlight, Izuku allowed himself to drop the mask completely. His face went blank, eyes cold as winter. He stood in the center of the trash field and raised one hand, palm up. Bakudo number 1, Sai. Spiritual energy, what this world might mistake for a quirk if anyone saw it, manifested as invisible force. A rusted car door 20 feet away suddenly flew toward him, freezing in midair 3 feet from his palm. It rotated slowly, held by the binding spell as surely as if gripped by invisible hands. Izuku smiled. Not the shy, hopeful smile of Midoriya, the slight, knowing curve of Sōsuke Aizen. This world's energy is different from Reiryoku, he murmured, studying the spell's manifestation. Coarser, less refined, but it adapts. My Kido evolves with each use, learning to feed on whatever spiritual essence exists in this dimension. He clenched his fist. The car door crumpled like paper, compressed into a ball of scrap metal that fell to the sand with a thud. 10 months to prepare a body already prepared. 10 months to perfect a mask already perfected. 10 months to earn one for all, the Hogyoku of this world. He looked up at the stars, at the vast, indifferent universe that had given him a second chance at ascension. Soul Society believed they'd stopped me, sealed me. But they never understood. I don't lose. I simply reposition for the next phase. Green lightning crackled around his fingertips, a preview of what was to come, a spark of one-for-all's power that he'd steal and make his own. This world has no Soul King, no divine linchpin, just a symbol made of flesh and hope, burning himself out to keep chaos at bay. And when he passes that power to me... The smile widened. When they all watch me inherit his legacy, see that green lightning flash. He raised his hand toward the moon, fingers spread like he was grasping something invisible. They'll complete the spell without even knowing they're casting it. Every witness to One for All becomes my servant. Every flash of green light tightens the web, and by the time they realize what's happened, his hand closed into a fist. It will be far too late to resist. The UA entrance exam arrived like a gift wrapped in chaos. Izuku stood in the crowd of applicants, surrounded by hopefuls with flashy quirks and desperate dreams. Around him, teenagers crackled with electricity, grew extra limbs, manipulated elements, a carnival of supernatural abilities that this world had normalized into everyday existence. Izuku appeared utterly ordinary among them. Plain school uniform, messy green hair, nervous expression. His hands trembled as he clutched his exam ticket, and when a spiky-haired girl bumped into him, he stumbled with a mumbled apology that made her sneer. Watch where you're going, loser. 13 years old, Izuku thought, watching her strut away with her friends. Secure in her superiority because she can generate acid from her pores, she'll never realize how fragile that superiority truly is. Excuse me, you there with the green hair? Izuku turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered boy with glasses marching toward him with mechanical precision. The boy's eyes were sharp, analytical, radiating the kind of rigid order that came from privilege and discipline. You've been muttering to yourself for the past 5 minutes, the boy declared, voice carrying authority that hadn't been earned yet. It's distracting to other examinees. Please show more consideration. Izuku blinked, then ducked his head in embarrassment. Sorry, I didn't realize I was doing it out loud. I was just analyzing everyone's quirks, trying to figure out what I'm up against. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. Bad habit. I'll be quiet. The boy's stern expression softened slightly. Ah, strategic analysis. That's actually quite practical. He adjusted his glasses. I apologize for being harsh. I'm Tenya Ida from Sume Private Academy. Izuku Midoriya from just a regular middle school. Izuku smiled shyly, projecting exactly the right amount of insecurity. Good luck in the exam, Ida nodded sharply. And to you as well. Engine quirk in his calves, Izuku noted, watching Ida march away. Speed and power, but requires straight-line movement. Predictable. Useful for the exam's robot targets, less useful against thinking opponents. Hey, you almost tripped! A hand caught Izuku's shoulder, and he turned to find a girl with brown hair and pink cheeks smiling at him. She'd used her quirk to stop his stumble. Zero gravity, he recognized instantly, seeing how she'd touched him and neutralized his weight before he could fall over nothing. Ah! Izuku jerked back, blushing furiously. Thank you. I'm so clumsy. I almost embarrassed myself before the exam even started. The girl giggled. It's okay. I'm nervous too. I'm Ochako Uraraka. Let's both do our best. She bounded away, waving cheerfully. Izuku waved back, maintaining the shy smile until she disappeared into the crowd. Then his expression went flat. Zero gravity. Touch-based activation. 5-finger contact required. Upper limit unknown, but likely mass-dependent for nausea side effect with overuse. Useful for mobility and support. Limited offensive capability without environmental objects to manipulate. He filed the information away in a mind that had spent lifetimes cataloging opponents' abilities, finding weaknesses, exploiting gaps in power. Present Mike's presentation was loud, obnoxious, and ultimately unnecessary. Izuku already knew the exam format. Defeat robots worth varying points, compete for the highest score. The zero-pointer was the obvious trap, a massive obstacle designed to test retreat and tactical thinking rather than direct combat. Children's games, he thought, even as he nodded along with the explanation, scribbling notes in his notebook to appear studious and engaged. The doors to Battle Center B opened with a mechanical hiss. Begin. Present Mike's voice echoed across the facility, and every examinee exploded into motion. Quirks activated in a symphony of supernatural power. Ice walls erupted, energy blasts fired. Students grew to giant size and charged forward like kaiju. Izuku walked. Just walked, hands in pockets, expression calm and analytical, while chaos erupted around him. Other students rushed past, desperate to reach robots first, to rack up points before the competition claimed them all. A 1-point robot rounded the corner, targeting scanners locking onto Izuku. Its mechanical arm raised, weapon systems charging. Izuku's fist moved so fast it blurred. Crack! The robot's head caved in like aluminum foil. Sparks flew. The machine toppled backward, systems dead before it hit the ground. Izuku shook his hand slightly as if the impact had stung, and kept walking. 1.1% one for all, he calculated. Toshinori wanted me to use 5% as a baseline, but that's laughably excessive for these targets. Pure Shinigami physical enhancement is more than sufficient. Another robot, another single punch. The two-pointer didn't even have time to register threat level before its core shattered and its limbs went limp. 30 seconds. 5 robots down. Each one disabled with a single, precise strike that looked like overwhelming quirk power, but was actually calculated physical technique enhanced by spiritual energy invisible to all sensors. Other examinees noticed the green-haired boy cutting through robots like a scythe through wheat. Whispers spread. Who is that? Some kind of strength enhancement quirk? He's not even trying. Izuku heard them all and smiled slightly. Let them speculate. Let them wonder. Every assumption they made was another brick in the foundation of the mask. A three-pointer lunged from an alley, larger and faster than the previous models. Izuku sidestepped with minimal movement. Shunpo compressed into a simple dodge, looking like enhanced reflexes rather than supernatural speed. His counterpunch took the robot in the chest, and the entire torso imploded, metal and circuits crushing inward around his fist. The machine collapsed in a heap of sparking debris. 43 points, Izuku thought, mentally tallying. More than enough for admission. Time to show restraint, make it seem like I'm reaching my limits. He slowed his pace deliberately, allowed his breathing to become heavier, added a slight limp to his gait. When the next robot appeared, he took 3 punches instead of 1, making each strike look more desperate, more strained. Performance is everything. UA's teachers are watching. I need to seem talented but not inhuman, powerful but still growing. A diamond in the rough that they'll want to polish. Then came the rumbling. The ground shook. Buildings trembled. From the center of Battle Center B, something massive rose into view. A robot the size of a skyscraper, bristling with weapons, optical sensors glowing red with targeting data, the zero-pointer. Run, someone screamed, and the command rippled through the examinees like a wave. Students turned and fled, recognizing the obvious trap, the unwinnable scenario designed to test decision-making under pressure. Izuku started to turn as well, following the crowd. And then he heard it. Help! Someone help! A girl's voice, high and panicked, coming from the zero-pointer's direction. Izuku's eyes narrowed. He looked back and saw Uraraka Ochako pinned under rubble, her leg trapped, frantically trying to activate her quirk on the debris, but unable to get proper 5-finger contact. The zero-pointer's shadow fell over her. Its massive foot raised, preparing to step forward, and if it did, she would be crushed into paste. Strategic options. Aizen's mind calculated in microseconds. Leave her. I've scored enough points. There's no reward for rescue in this exam, and risking myself for a stranger serves no purpose. But then he saw the cameras. Dozens of them, positioned around the battle center, recording every moment. UA's teachers watching every decision, evaluating not just power but character. And he saw the other examinees watching too, frozen in horror and indecision, too afraid to act, too far away to help. This is a test within a test, he realized. The zero-pointer isn't just an obstacle, it's a moral examination. Do you run or do you save? Sōsuke Aizen, who had never saved anyone in his existence, who viewed altruism as evolutionary weakness, made Izuku Midoriya choose heroism. His legs moved. Not Shunpo, too obvious. Just enhanced running, pumping one for all through his limbs at 5%, green lightning crackling around his body for the first time in full view of the cameras. The examinees gasped. He's going back! Is he insane? That's the zero-pointer. You're supposed to run from it. Izuku ignored them all. He reached Uraraka in seconds, grabbing the rubble that pinned her leg. Don't worry. His voice was strained, heroic, desperate. I've got you! Your leg! Uraraka gasped, pointing at the zero-pointer's descending foot. You need to run. Just leave me. Never. Izuku lifted the rubble, hundreds of pounds, enhanced to seem like it took all his strength. Heroes save people. That's what All Might would do. He threw the debris aside and pulled Uraraka free just as the zero-pointer's foot slammed into the ground where they'd been. The shockwave threw them both backward, tumbling across pavement. Izuku rolled to his feet, positioning himself between Uraraka and the massive robot. His arm glowed with green lightning, one for all surging to maximum output, or so it appeared 100% in this arm he projected to the watchers. All or nothing, the last resort of a desperate hero, but internally, 30% one for all, 70% spiritual pressure, perfect ratio for maximum impact with minimal actual strain. Smash! His fist connected with the zero-pointer's chassis, and the punch generated a shockwave that rippled through the entire exam site. The robot's torso caved in. Metal shrieked. Circuits exploded. The massive machine tilted, then toppled backward in slow motion, crashing into the artificial cityscape with a sound like the end of the world. Boom, dust and debris filled the air. Sirens blared. Present Mike's voice echoed, "Exam complete? All examinees return to the entry plaza." Izuku's arm hung limp at his side, shattered, or appearing to be. He'd used Bakudo to fracture his own bones just enough to create swelling and bruising without permanent damage. Isferton's pain was irrelevant, but the appearance of sacrifice was essential. "Deku-kun!" Uraraka crawled toward him, tears streaming down her face. "Your arm! You destroyed your arm to save me!" He turned to her, and even through the pain he didn't feel, he managed the most heroic smile in his arsenal. "Ah, are you okay? That's all that matters." She stared at him like he was All Might himself, like he just redefined what heroism meant in her young, sheltered world. Her face flushed pink, not from her quirk, but from something deeper, more dangerous. And so the first piece binds herself to me willingly, Izuku thought, even as Uraraka threw her arms around him in a hug that made him wince, performatively. How convenient. Recovery Girl healed his arm in the medical tent afterward, her quirk knitting bones with a grandmother's gentle efficiency. All Might appeared, secretly in his skinny form, to check on his protege. Midoriya Shunin. Toshinori's voice was thick with emotion. "What you did out there, sacrificing yourself to save that girl, that was truly heroic. You've already internalized the most important lesson." Izuku looked up at his mentor with wide, earnest eyes. "I just did what you would have done, All Might. What a real hero does." Toshinori actually had to turn away, overcome with pride and joy. This boy, this precious, selfless boy, was everything he'd hoped for in a successor. Kind, brave, willing to destroy himself to save a stranger. If only he could see the truth, Aizen thought behind Midoriya's grateful smile, that every heroic choice is a calculated move, every sacrifice is an investment, every saved life is another thread in the web. 2 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. Izuku stood in his small apartment, holding the envelope while his mother Inko watched nervously. She'd supported his hero dreams with a mother's desperate hope, and when he opened the letter and the holographic All Might appeared to announce his admission to UA, she burst into tears. "Izuku, you did it! My baby's going to UA!" She hugged him so tight, his ribs creaked. Izuku hugged her back, smiling, because Inko Midoriya was genuine in her love, uncomplicated in her support, and therefore utterly harmless. This woman birthed a quirkless child and raised him with nothing but encouragement, he thought, patting her back. She's the perfect cover. No one would suspect a boy with such a devoted, simple mother of harboring ambitions beyond heroism. That night, alone in his room, Izuku stood before the mirror and watched Midoriya's face shift. The nervous smile faded, the bright eyes went cold, the slouched posture straightened into perfect, predatory alignment. For just a moment, Sōsuke Aizen looked back at himself from the glass. "Phase 1 complete," he whispered. "Admission secured, All Might's trust earned, foundation laid." He touched the mirror's surface, and his reflection smiled. Not Midoriya's smile, but the slight, knowing curve that had terrified Soul Society. Now begins the true deception. UA High School rose from the city like a monument to heroism itself. All glass and steel and impossible architecture that screamed, "This is where legends are made." Izuku stood at the gates on the first day, surrounded by nervous freshmen with dreams in their eyes and quirks in their veins, all hoping to become the next generation of heroes. He wore his uniform perfectly, tie straight, collar crisp, red shoes polished. His expression was carefully calibrated, nervous excitement with an undercurrent of determination. The mask was flawless. "Deku-kun!" Uraraka's voice cut through the crowd, and she bounded toward him with that infectious energy that came from genuinely good people who hadn't yet learned how cruel the world could be. Her smile could light rooms. "Uraraka-san!" Izuku brightened, adding a slight stutter. You made it! I hoped we'd be in the same class." "Me too." She fell into step beside him, chattering about the entrance exam, about how amazing his punch was, about how she'd scored enough points from the secret rescue element that UA had included in scoring. Turns out saving people was worth points after all. I guess that's what real hero schools value. Naive, Izuku thought. Sweet. Perfect. They reached Class 1A's door, comically oversized, designed to accommodate students with giant quirks. Izuku reached for the handle. Remove your hand from that door. Ida Tenya appeared like a blue-haired missile of rigid propriety, marching toward them with mechanical precision. Midoriya-san, Uraraka-san, we meet again. I must apologize for my behavior at the entrance exam. I completely misjudged you both. He bowed at perfect 90 degrees. Your heroism during the zero-pointer incident was exemplary. I was too focused on competition to consider rescue as a priority. I have much to learn from your example. Izuku waved his hands frantically. No, please don't bow. I just did what anyone would do. You were focused on the objective. That's completely reasonable. Nevertheless, Ida straightened, I hope we can learn from each other as classmates. The three of them entered Class 1A together, and Izuku's eyes swept across the room in microseconds, cataloging every student, every quirk, every potential piece on the board. Bakugo Katsuki sat in the back, feet on desk, glaring at nothing with the perpetual rage of someone who'd been told they were special their entire life and believed it. When his eyes landed on Izuku, something ugly twisted in his expression. Deku, he spat, the name a curse. Izuku flinched, adding a slight tremble to his shoulders. Hello, Kachan? Bakugo Katsuki. Explosion quirk. Exceptionally powerful, exceptionally predictable. Inferiority complex masked as superiority. Useful as a measuring stick, irrelevant as a threat. Others in the class, a boy with red and white hair who radiated cold indifference, a girl with a ponytail whose posture screamed wealthy upbringing, a small boy with purple balls for hair who was openly leering at the female students. Children playing at heroism, Aizen observed. None of them understand what they're truly preparing for. If you're here to socialize, you can leave. Every head turned toward the door, where a sleeping bag on the floor was apparently occupied by a human being. The sleeping bag wormed forward, and a disheveled, exhausted-looking man emerged like a caterpillar from a cocoon. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. Put these on and meet me outside. He tossed gym uniforms at them with the enthusiasm of someone who'd rather be sleeping. You have 5 minutes. The class erupted into confused chatter. Izuku noted everything. Aizawa's bloodshot eyes, his capture weapon, the way he moved with casual efficiency despite looking half dead. This was Eraserhead, the underground hero who could nullify quirks with a glance. Interesting, Izuku thought. A teacher who can shut down supernatural abilities. He'll be useful for learning to fight without relying on power alone. And his cynical worldview will make him trust competence over charisma. Outside, Aizawa revealed the quirk apprehension test. 8 physical challenges. Use your quirks however you want. Highest total score wins. Oh, and whoever comes in last place gets expelled immediately. The class gasped. Uraraka's hand shot up. But that's not fair. What about the entrance ceremony, the orientation? Aizawa's smile was dangerous. Fair? Natural disasters aren't fair. Villain attacks aren't fair. Heroes don't get fairness. They get results, or they get dead. His eyes swept across the students, measuring them, judging them. If you think this will be easy because you're at UA, you're wrong. I've expelled entire classes before. If you can't handle pressure, you don't belong here. Bakugo went first on the ball throw, 705.2 meters with an explosive launch that made the ground shake. He strutted back, smirking at Izuku like he'd just proven something fundamental about their hierarchy. 8.3 seconds from activation to impact, Izuku noted. Trajectory predictable. Force impressive but wasteful. He uses maximum power when half would suffice. Inefficient. Midoriya, you're up. Izuku stepped into the circle, holding the softball with both hands like it might explode. His expression was nervous, uncertain. Around him, classmates whispered, Isn't he the kid who destroyed the zero-pointer? Yeah, but he shattered his arm doing it. Can he even use his quirk safely? This should be interesting. Izuku wound up, channeling One for All into his arm, 5% output, enhanced by spiritual pressure to seem like pure quirk power. Green lightning crackled up his bicep, and for just a moment, everyone watching felt something. A pressure. Subtle. Imperceptible as conscious thought, but there nonetheless. Like standing at the edge of a cliff you can't see, or hearing a predator's breathing in darkness. Kyōka Suigetsu's activation sequence. Every student, every teacher, Every camera recording this moment captured that green flash, and in that microsecond, reality shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, just a subtle rewriting of perception, a gentle suggestion implanted in hindsight. This boy is trustworthy, this boy is heroic, this boy would never deceive you. Izuku threw the ball. Boom! It rocketed into the sky like a missile, vanishing into the clouds. The distance reader beeped, calculating, and displayed 889.3 meters. The class erupted in shock. Bakugo's face went purple with rage. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, calculating, but the subtle hypnosis made him think. Impressive. This kid has potential. I should watch him closely, not because he's suspicious, but because he could be a great hero. Good, Aizawa said simply. Next. The rest of the tests proceeded efficiently. Izuku placed third overall, high enough to be impressive, low enough to not seem inhuman. First place went to Yaoyo Rozumomo with her creation quirk's versatility. Second to Todoroki Shoto with his half-ice, half-fire, overwhelming power. Bakugo placed fifth and looked ready to commit murder. When the scores were revealed, Aizawa's smile turned sharp. Oh, and the expulsion thing? That was a logical ruse to make you give maximum effort. The class's collective sigh of relief was palpable. Izuku allowed himself a small smile, the kind that said, I knew all along but was still worried, because that's what Midoriya would do. Internally, a teacher who lies to motivate students. How perfectly aligned with my methodology. We'll get along excellently. The first week passed in a blur of basic hero training. All Might taught battle training in his booming, enthusiastic way, pairing students for combat exercises that were supposed to teach teamwork and tactics. Izuku got paired with Uraraka against Bakugo and Ida. The exercise was simple. Heroes, Izuku and Uraraka, had to secure a fake weapon on the top floor of a building. Villains, Bakugo and Ida, had to defend it. 15 minutes, quirks allowed, try not to kill each other. All Might's voice boomed through the speakers. Heroes, you may begin. Izuku and Uraraka entered the building cautiously. She was nervous, chattering to fill silence. Bakugo seems really angry at you, Deku-kun. Do you two have history? We grew up together, Izuku said softly, eyes scanning for traps. He has an amazing quirk. I was quirkless. He didn't handle that well. Translation, Bakugo's ego required a punching bag to feel superior, and I provided one for 14 years because it was useful camouflage. Let people think you're weak, and they never prepare for the knife in the dark. An explosion roared from the hallway ahead. Bakugo came flying around the corner like a missile of rage and nitroglycerin, hand outstretched, murder in his eyes. Deku! Izuku shoved Uraraka aside and dodged with Shinpo disguised as desperation. Bakugo's explosion took out a chunk of wall where he'd been standing. Smoke and dust filled the corridor. Kachan, wait, we can talk about this. Talk? Another explosion. More wall chunks flying. I'm going to crush you, Deku. You think you're better than me now? You think getting into UA makes you special? He's projecting, Izuku observed, dodging another blast. He defined himself as superior to me for 14 years. My success threatens his entire identity. Predictable. Exploitable. Uraraka-san, go for the weapon. Izuku called out, I'll keep him busy. She hesitated, then nodded and ran, using zero gravity to float through a hole in the ceiling. Bakugo started to chase, but Izuku stepped into his path. Your opponent is me, Kachan. Green lightning flickered around Izuku's fist. 5% full cowling, the minimum to seem like he was trying. Bakugo's grin was feral. Finally gonna fight back, Deku? Good. They clashed in the hallway, and to the watching students and All Might in the observation room, it looked like an intense battle between rivals. Explosions met glowing punches. Debris flew. The building shook. Reality was different. Izuku wasn't fighting. He was conducting. Every dodge was calculated to make Bakugo overextend. Every counter was perfectly timed to seem desperate rather than dominant. He controlled the fight's tempo, its location, its dramatics, all while maintaining the mask of struggling heroism. You wanted to be the best, Kachan, Izuku thought, ducking a right hook that would have taken his head off. But you never realized. The best don't announce themselves. They operate from shadows, pulling strings until the moment of revelation. He caught Bakugo's wrist mid-punch, twisted, and for just a second, Bakugo saw something in Deku's eyes that made his blood freeze. Emptiness. Complete utter void behind green irises. Then it was gone, replaced by heroic determination, and Bakugo convinced himself he'd imagined it. But his next attack was weaker, hesitant, confused. Upstairs, Uraraka secured the weapon just as the timer hit 0. Heroes win! All Might's voice boomed. Bakugo stood in the hallway, breathing hard, staring at Izuku with an expression caught between rage and something almost like fear. What? What are you, Deku? Izuku smiled his brightest, most innocent smile. I'm someone trying to be a hero, Kachan, just like you. But the seed of doubt had been planted. 3 weeks into the semester, the USJ incident arrived like a gift from a god Izuku didn't believe in. The unforeseen simulation joint was a massive training facility designed for disaster rescue scenarios. Mountains, floods, fires, landslides, every catastrophe a hero might face contained in one massive dome. Class 1A filed in with the enthusiasm of students on a field trip. Aizawa gave his usual tired warnings about being careful. 13. The space hero explained the facility's zones with bubbly enthusiasm. Izuku stood at the back of the group, analyzing sightlines, escape routes, structural weaknesses. The facility was impressive, but tactically it was a maze, which made it perfect for ambush. If I were planning an attack on UA students, he thought, this would be ideal. Isolated from the main campus, multiple zones to split defenders, limited pro-hero support. The lights flickered. A dark portal opened in the central plaza, swirling like a tear in reality itself. From it emerged figures, dozens of them, wearing mismatched clothing, carrying weapons, quirks activating with hostile intent, villains. The League of Villains, led by a man-child covered in severed hands and a portal quirk user made of smoke and darkness. At their center stood something that shouldn't exist, a bioengineered monster with exposed brain, massive muscle mass, and dead eyes. Greetings, heroes. The smoke villain's voice was cultured, almost polite. We are the League of Villains. Forgive our intrusion, but we've come to kill All Might. The class froze. Kirishima started forward with brave stupidity. No way, we're letting you. 13, get the students out of here. Aizawa's capture weapon unfurled, his hair rising as his quirk activated. They're here for a fight, and I'll give them one. Kurogiri, Izuku identified the portal villain. Warp Gate quirk, likely limited by line of sight or coordinates. And that creature? Fascinating. Multiple quirks? Biological fusion? This Nomu represents advanced experimentation beyond this world's current scientific capability. Kurogiri's portal expanded, swallowing the students before they could retreat. Reality twisted, and Izuku felt the familiar sensation of forced teleportation. Crude compared to Senkaimon, but effective. When the disorientation cleared, he stood in the flood zone with Tsuyu Asui and Minoru Mineta. Water stretched in all directions, a massive lake with a central boat. Villains surfaced around them like sharks, quirks making them adapted for aquatic combat. Mineta screamed. Tsuyu stayed calm, her frog-like features impassive. Midoriya-chan, what do we do? Ribbit. Izuku's mind calculated in microseconds. 37 villains, various mutation and transformation types. Tsuyu's swimming ability was excellent, but purely defensive. Mineta was useless. Panicking. Strategically, the smart move was retreat to the boat, wait for pro-heroes to rescue them. That's what Aizawa would expect, what any rational student would do. But Izuku looked at the cameras positioned around the zone, looked at the villains closing in with confident grins, and made a different calculation. These villains are witnesses. Everyone I defeat while using One for All's lightning is another soul bound to Kyōka Suigetsu. And if I hold back, if I play weak, I waste the opportunity. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Tsuyu blinked. Midoriya-chan? The first villain lunged, a shark mutation type with rows of teeth and webbed hands. Fast in water, faster than humans, confident in his element, Izuku sidestepped with Shunpo compressed to look like enhanced reflexes. His hand shot out, caught the villain's wrist mid-lunge, and twisted crack. The sound of breaking bone echoed across the water. The shark villain screamed, jerking back, cradling his shattered arm. You little... Izuku's expression was completely flat. Empty. For just a moment, Tsuyu saw it, the predator beneath the stuttering boy's mask. Then it was gone, replaced by desperate determination. I won't let you hurt them. Izuku's voice cracked with manufactured fear turned courage. 3 more villains converged. Izuku pointed. Hado number 31, Shakaho. Red spiritual energy exploded from his fingertip, but to watching eyes it appeared as red-colored one-for-all output, a variant technique. The blast boomed across the water, slamming into the villains with concussive force that sent them flying, unconscious before they hit the surface. Mineta stared. mouth hanging open. What? How? More villains. They came in waves, and Izuku met them with surgical precision. A jab to solar plexus, enhanced with One for All's green lightning, flash, and the hypnosis activated. A spinning kick, lightning crackling, and another mind caught. Each strike calculated for maximum efficiency, each flash of power binding witnesses deeper into the spell. The fight lasted 47 seconds. When the water settled, 20 villains floated unconscious or writhing with broken limbs. Izuku stood in the center, breathing hard, performatively, scratched and bruised, self-inflicted when they weren't watching, but victorious. Tsuyu swam up to him slowly, eyes wide with something between awe and wariness. "Midoriya-chan, you're really strong, Ribbit." He gave her the Midoriya smile, shy, embarrassed, heroic. "I just did what All Might would do. Protect people." 17 witnesses, Aizen calculated behind the smile. 17 more caught in the web. Efficient. Across the USJ, Aizawa fought the remaining villains with brutal efficiency, his capture weapon and hand-to-hand combat overwhelming the League's fodder. But then came the Nomu, Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta arrived at the central plaza just in time to see the bioweapon grab Aizawa and slam him into the ground with force that cracked concrete. The teacher's arm bent at a wrong angle. Blood pooled. "Sensei," Tsuyu gasped. The hand-covered villain, Shigaraki Tomura, Izuku identified, giggled with childish delight. "Break him, Nomu. Show them what happens when heroes try too hard." The Nomu raised its fist for the killing blow. Boom! The door exploded inward, and All Might arrived like divine intervention made flesh, his smile fierce despite the fear in his eyes. "I am here." The symbol of peace had come to save them. Izuku watched from the stairs as All Might engaged the Nomu in combat. The clash was cataclysmic. Punches that generated shockwaves, impacts that shattered the ground, raw power colliding with bioengineered strength. And Izuku studied it all with hungry focus. "Multiple quirks confirmed," he noted, watching the Nomu absorb All Might's punches without damage. Shock absorption, regeneration, enhanced strength. This is crude hollowification, an attempt to fuse incompatible powers into one being. But it lacks will, lacks soul. It's a weapon, not an evolution. All Might was struggling. His time limit was approaching, steam hissing from his body, muscles starting to deflate. The Nomu regenerated faster than he could damage it. He's going to burn out, Izuku realized. Use his remaining embers to win, then retire immediately afterward. This is the beginning of the end for the symbol of peace. Perfect. All Might's fist ignited with every ounce of remaining power. United States of Smash! The punch connected with the Nomu's face, and the shockwave shattered windows across the USJ. The bioweapon flew backward, crashing through the ceiling, disappearing into the sky like a meteorite in reverse. Shigaraki screamed frustration. Kurogiri opened a portal. The League of Villains retreated, their plan failed, their weapon gone, silence fell over the USJ. Then Izuku was running, tears in his eyes toward where All Might stood, deflating into his true form. "All Might, you did it! You were so cool! You saved everyone!" He threw his arms around Toshinori's skeletal frame, and the symbol, now just a dying man, hugged him back with trembling hands. "Young Midoriya, everyone. Everyone. I'm sorry I was late." Izuku pulled back, face wet with genuine tears triggered by deliberate stress response, eyes shining with perfect admiration. "You're the greatest hero ever. Thank you." Around them, Class 1A gathered, exhausted and traumatized but alive. They looked at All Might with worship, looked at Izuku with respect and fondness. None of them saw the slight smile on Izuku's face when he turned away. 3 months, Aizen thought, helping Aizawa onto a stretcher while paramedics arrived. "In 3 months, I've secured the symbol of peace as dependency, earned the trust of UA's most cynical teacher, and proven myself to my classmates as reliable and heroic." He looked at the damaged USJ, at the unconscious villains, at the reporters gathering outside. The web tightens. Phase 2 begins. The sports festival arrived with fanfare that could be heard across Japan. Millions watched on television as UA's first-year students prepared to demonstrate their abilities to the entire nation, a tradition that served as both competition and recruitment showcase for pro heroes seeking sidekicks. Izuku stood in the stadium's waiting area, surrounded by Class 1A, listening to President Mike's announcement echo across the arena. "Welcome to UA's Sports Festival, where the next generation of heroes will shine." The crowd roared. 50,000 spectators packed the stands and millions more watched from home, offices, public screens across the country. Witnesses, Izuku thought, his expression carefully calibrated to show nervous excitement. Millions of witnesses all about to watch me activate One for All. Millions more added to Kyōka Suigetsu's effect with every lightning flash. Todoroki Shoto approached him in the hallway before the opening ceremony, heterochromatic eyes cold and analytical. Midoriya. Todoroki-kun? Izuku tilted his head, the picture of friendly confusion. I'm going to beat you, Todoroki said flatly. Whatever happened at the entrance exam, whatever you did at the USJ, I'm stronger, I'll prove it. Izuku blinked, then smiled gently. I look forward to facing you. May the best hero win. Todoroki's eyes narrowed at the complete lack of hostility. Then he walked away, leaving frost patterns where his feet had touched the floor. Ice and fire, Izuku noted. Powerful combination, but he refuses to use the fire. Trauma related to his father, Endeavor. Emotional limitations create tactical weaknesses. Useful. The first event was the obstacle race, a 4-kilometer course filled with traps, robots, and terrain hazards. All students started together, and the first 42 to cross the finish line advanced to the next round. Present Mike's voice boomed. Begin! Chaos erupted immediately. Todoroki flash froze the entrance tunnel, immobilizing dozens of students in ice while he sprinted ahead. Bakugo blasted over the frozen competitors with explosions. Others used their quirks creatively to escape the crush. Izuku waited. 3, 2, 1. The leading students hit the first obstacle. Massive robots from the entrance exam, positioned to block the path. Todoroki froze them mid-attack, their joints locked, immobile. Bakugo blew their heads off with point-blank explosions. Izuku activated One for All, full cowling, 5% output, green lightning crackling up his limbs, illuminating him like an emerald beacon visible to every camera, every spectator, every soul watching this moment. Flash. The hypnosis spread like ripples across water. 50,000 in-person witnesses, millions watching live broadcast. All of them saw the lightning, and in that instant, reality shifted imperceptibly. This boy is trustworthy. This boy is heroic. This boy would never deceive you. He jumped, enhanced strength launching him onto a robot's head, then springboarded off its shoulder, clearing the entire obstacle in a single bound. The crowd roared. Midoriya with an incredible display. Present Mike's commentary echoed, "That's the kid who took down the zero-pointer." Izuku landed and kept running, maintaining steady pace that put him in 5th place. Behind Todoroki, Bakugo, a support course girl with gadgets, and someone with a tape-shooting quirk. The fall. A massive chasm with tight ropes stretched across. Izuku used full cowling to sprint across the ropes with supernatural balance, lightning flashing with each step. More witnesses bound the minefield, explosives buried in pink dirt, ready to detonate under pressure. Izuku wove through them with Shunpo disguised as prediction and analysis, his muttering audible to nearby microphones. Pattern suggests 3-meter spacing. Detonation requires 15 pounds of pressure. Optimal path is... He crossed without triggering a single mine, and the crowd loved it. He finished 3rd overall. Todoroki first, Bakugo second, then him. The second event was Cavalry Battle. Teams of 4, one rider on top holding a headband worth points, fight to steal headbands from other teams. Total points determined by entrance placement, with first place worth 10 million points. Todoroki's headband was worth 10 million. He immediately became the target. Izuku's team. Uraraka for mobility, Tokoyami for defense, Hatsume for support items. The unlikely combination worked with surgical precision. Uraraka made them weightless to dodge attacks, Tokoyami's dark shadow intercepted headband snatchers, Hatsume's gadgets provided tactical advantages, but the real show was Izuku's strategy. He directed the team with calm efficiency, predicting enemy movements, coordinating defenses, all while maintaining the nervous muttering persona that made him seem earnest rather than calculating. When Todoroki's team closed in, ice spreading across the arena floor, Izuku's eyes narrowed. Uraraka-san, make us float. Tokoyami-kun, grab the headband. Hatsume-san, activate propulsion. They launched into the air, propelled by Hatsume's modified support items, hovering above the battlefield while Todoroki's ice spread harmlessly below. The crowd gasped at the creative tactic. Team Midoriya with the aerial advantage. Present Mike screamed with delight. They didn't win. Todoroki's raw power and perfect teamwork secured the 10 million points. But Izuku's team placed second, earning them advancement to the finals and, more importantly, millions more witnesses to his quirk's green lightning. The final event. Tournament bracket. 16 students. One-on-one fights. Winner advances. Champion crowned. Izuku's first opponent, Hitoshi Shinso, the brainwashing quirk user who'd been denied entry to the hero course. They stood across from each other in the arena, 50,000 watching, millions more on screens worldwide. Shinso's expression was bitter, resigned. "You're lucky," Shinso said quietly. "Born with a powerful quirk, praised as a hero. People like you don't understand what it's like to be called a villain just because of how you were born." Izuku's eyes softened with genuine understanding. Not empathy, but recognition of useful rhetoric. "I was quirkless until recently. I understand better than you think." Shinso's eyes widened slightly, surprise breaking through his cynical mask. "Then you know, people judge you before you even try. Call you useless, worthless, wrong." "I do know." Izuku's voice was gentle, warm, perfectly calibrated to seem like he was offering solidarity. "But that's why we're here, right? To prove them wrong, to show that heroes can come from anywhere." Shinso stared at him, and for a moment the bitterness wavered. "Maybe." "Yeah. Start!" Present Mike's voice shattered the moment. Shinso lunged verbally. "Why are you so—" Izuku's fist, wreathed in green lightning, caught him in the jaw before he could finish the sentence. The punch was perfectly calibrated, 5% full cowling, enough to knock Shinso out instantly without permanent damage. The brainwasher collapsed, unconscious, before he hit the ground. The crowd sat in stunned silence for a heartbeat, then erupted. Midoriya wins with one punch. Izuku looked down at Shinso's unconscious form with an expression of apologetic determination. "I'm sorry, but I can't afford to get brainwashed. My dream is too important." He helped carry Shinso to the medical tent afterward, whispering, when no one could hear, "You have potential. Don't give up." Shinso, semi-conscious, mumbled something that might have been gratitude. Useful, Aizen noted. His quirk could be valuable later. Plant seeds of loyalty now, harvest them when needed. Round 2, Izuku versus Tenya Ida. Ida was honorable, straightforward, powerful. His engine quirk gave him explosive speed in straight lines, and he'd been training intensively since the USJ to become stronger, faster, more heroic. They faced each other across the arena, and Ida bowed formally. "Midoriya-kun, let us have an honorable match." "Of course, Ida-kun." Izuku returned the bow. Perfect respect, perfect friendship. "Begin." Ida activated Recipro Burst, maximum engine output, speed that blurred him into a streak of motion. He crossed the arena in under a second, arm extended for a clothesline that would knock Izuku out of bounds. Izuku sidestepped with Shunpo disguised as predictive analysis. Ida flew past him, engines screaming, unable to stop his momentum. He crashed into the arena wall with a thud that cracked concrete. Izuku was already moving, full cowling at 20%, green lightning blazing around his entire body now, visible from every angle, every camera, every screen across Japan. Flash. 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 Millions more souls bound with each flicker of emerald power. He closed the distance and delivered a spinning kick to Ida's section. Controlled strength, calculated angle. Ida flew backward. Tumbling across the arena floor, sliding to a stop just before the out-of-bounds line, the crowd roared. Ida struggled to stand, engine sputtering, one leg damaged from the wall impact. He looked at Izuku with determination and pain. I can still... Yield, Ida-kun, Izuku said gently, approaching with hands raised non-threateningly. You're hurt. There's no shame in. I will not yield. Ida lunged again, pushing his damaged engines beyond their limit. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Stubborn. Honorable to a fault. He'll hurt himself rather than admit defeat. One punch. 30% full cowling, aimed for the solar plexus, perfectly calculated to knock wind from lungs without breaking ribs. Ida collapsed, gasping, unable to continue. Midoriya wins. Izuku knelt beside him immediately, genuine concern on his face. Are you okay? I'm sorry. I had to stop you before you hurt yourself worse. Ida gasped for air, then smiled weakly. You held back. Even at the end, you were protecting me. We're friends, Izuku said simply. Friends protect each other. Ida's eyes watered with gratitude and shame. Thank you, Midoriya-kun. And so he binds himself deeper, Aizen thought, helping Ida to his feet. Loyalty earned through perceived mercy. Efficient. Semifinals. Izuku versus Todoroki Shoto. This was the moment. The entire nation watched. All Might stood in the competitor's box, hands clenched with nervous pride. Endeavor watched from the stands, flame beard flickering with anticipation for his son's victory. Izuku and Todoroki stood across from each other, and the temperature dropped. Frost spread from Todoroki's right side, creeping across the arena floor in crystalline patterns. "I won't use it," Todoroki said coldly. "I'll win with ice alone." Izuku tilted his head, the picture of confused concern. "You're fire, but that's half your strength. Why would you?" "It's his power." Todoroki's voice dripped with venom. "That bastard father of mine. I refuse to use his quirk. I'll become the #1 hero with ice alone, and he'll have to watch knowing his legacy died with his ambition." Silence fell across the arena. This was intensely personal. Trauma laid bare in front of millions. Izuku could have accepted it. Could have fought Todoroki's ice, won with One for All's superior power, advanced to the finals without complication, but Sōsuke Aizen saw something more valuable, an opportunity to own someone. "You're holding back," Izuku said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent arena through strategically placed microphones. "You have power, and you chain it out of spite. That's not rebellion, Todoroki. That's cowardice." Todoroki's eyes widened with shock and rage. "What did you say?" "You hate your father, so you cripple yourself. You think that hurts him?" Izuku's voice gained edge, losing the stutter, becoming something harder, sharper. "It doesn't. He doesn't care if you use ice or fire. He cares that you're weak, and by refusing your full strength, you prove him right. Shut up. If you truly want to reject your father, if you truly want to make him suffer," Izuku's eyes locked onto Todoroki's with uncomfortable intensity. "Surpass him with all your strength. Become so powerful that his shadow can't touch you. Show him that even with his quirk, you're better than he'll ever be." Todoroki trembled. His left side began to steam. That's the only way to win, Todoroki. Not by being half of yourself, but by being completely, overwhelmingly superior. Whoosh! Flames exploded from Todoroki's left side, engulfing half the arena in fire. The crowd screamed. Endeavor stood in the stands, flames intensifying with pride and vindication. "Yes!" the flame hero roared. "Show them Shoto!" The arena became a war zone. Ice and fire collided with green lightning. Temperatures swung from sub-zero to inferno. Concrete shattered. The barrier around the fighting stage strained under the sheer power output. Izuku and Todoroki met in the center, fists colliding, and the shockwave cracked the ground beneath them. But Izuku was smiling, not Midoriya's heroic smile, not the shy, gentle expression of a kind boy. The Aizen smile. Knowing. Superior. For just one frame before he masked it again, Todoroki saw something in Izuku's eyes that made his blood run cold. This isn't a fight. This is a test, and I'm the subject. They separated, breathing hard. Todoroki's left side blazed, his right side frosted. He raised both hands, preparing his ultimate attack. Izuku moved first. 100% full cowling. Lie! It was 60% One for All enhanced with Shinigami spiritual pressure, but to all observers it appeared as complete maximum output. Green lightning exploded around him like a pillar of emerald fire, and the power output made the stadium's structural supports groan. Every camera captured it. Every spectator witnessed it. Millions upon millions of souls seeing that green flash, and with each witnessing, Kyōka Suigetsu's grip tightened imperceptibly. Izuku's fist connected with Todoroki's combined ice and fire blast. Boom! The explosion was cataclysmic. The barrier shattered. Spectators in the front rows were blown backward. Cement chunks flew like meteors. When the dust cleared, Todoroki was unconscious outside the arena boundary. His uniform was singed, frost and char marks covering his body. Still breathing, but completely defeated. Izuku stood in the center of the crater his punch had created, right arm hanging limp, broken again, or appearing to be, blood trickling from his mouth, self-inflicted tongue bite, but standing, victorious. The arena sat in absolute silence. Then All Might stood in the competitor's box, tears streaming down his face, and started clapping. The applause spread like wildfire. 50,000 people rose to their feet, cheering, screaming, celebrating the boy who'd just put on the greatest display of heroic power they'd ever witnessed. Midoriya wins, advancing to the finals. Izuku looked up at All Might, at his mentor's tear-streaked face full of pride and joy, and gave the symbol of peace the most genuine smile he could manufacture. You're crying for a lie, Aizen thought, celebrating a deception, and you'll never know until it's too late. Recovery Girl healed them both afterward. Todoroki woke in the medical tent, confused and disoriented. When he saw Izuku sitting on the next bed, arm freshly healed, his expression was complicated. You made me use my fire. I helped you access your full power, Izuku corrected gently. What you do with it now is your choice. Todoroki stared at him for a long moment. Thank you, he said finally. I don't know if I can forgive him yet, but you're right. Being weak just to spite him, that's not victory. Exactly, Izuku smiled. Now you can become a real hero. Todoroki nodded slowly, something like respect and gratitude mixing in his eyes. If we face each other again, I won't lose. I look forward to it. They shook hands, and Todoroki left the tent believing he'd found a friend, a rival, someone who understood him. He had no idea he'd just been bound tighter to a web he couldn't see. Finals, Izuku versus Bakugo Katsuki. The two childhood friends stood across from each other in the arena, and Bakugo's face was a mask of barely contained rage. His hands trembled, his teeth ground audibly. Deku, he hissed. I'm gonna make you regret everything. Izuku's expression was carefully neutral. Kachan! Don't call me that! Bakugo's explosion filled the air between them with smoke and fury. You're not the worthless nobody anymore. You're not the quirkless loser I could beat down. So stop pretending. Stop acting like you're still weak. Fight me for real. The crowd murmured uncomfortably. This was personal, dark, the kind of hostility that went beyond sports rivalry. Izuku took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice different. Quieter. Colder. I've never pretended to be weak, Kachan. Bakugo's eyes widened. Begin! Bakugo exploded forward, literally and figuratively, launching himself with maximum output blasts that left scorch marks on the arena floor. His combat style was pure aggression, blast after blast, never giving opponents time to think, to breathe, to counter. It worked on everyone else. Izuku sidestepped the first attack with minimal movement, dodged the second with Shunpo disguised as prediction, the third, fourth, fifth, all missed by millimeters, and Bakugo's frustration grew with each failed strike. Stop dodging! Bakugo screamed, swinging wild haymakers wreathed in explosions. Stand still and fight! Izuku's eyes were cold, calculating. For just a moment, the mask slipped completely, and Bakugo saw what Todoroki had seen, what Tsuyu had glimpsed at the USJ emptiness. Complete, utter void where human emotion should exist. I've never looked down on you, Kachan, Izuku said softly, his voice barely audible over the explosions. You were never high enough for me to look down in the first place. Bakugo froze. His brain stuttered trying to process the statement, the tone, the absolute certainty in those words. What? Izuku moved. Green lightning blazed. Full cowling at 40%, enhanced with spiritual pressure, speed that made him vanish from Bakugo's perception. He reappeared behind the explosive hero, and before Bakugo could turn, Bakudo number 61, Rikujo Koro. 6 beams of yellow light pierced Bakugo's midsection, locking him in place. The binding spell manifested as what cameras would interpret as support equipment or quirk awakening. But the effect was undeniable. Bakugo couldn't move, couldn't activate his quirk, could only stand there, paralyzed, as Izuku walked around to face him. The crowd gasped, confused murmurs spread. What kind of quirk was this? Izuku stopped directly in front of Bakugo, close enough that only the paralyzed boy could hear his whisper. You wanted to stand at the top, Kachan. You spent 14 years convincing yourself you were special, superior, destined for greatness, but you never realized. His eyes met Bakugo's, and there was nothing in them. No anger, no pity, just acknowledgement of fact. I was already there, watching you crawl, waiting for you to become useful. Bakugo's eyes widened with horror, rage, denial. Izuku's fist, wreathed in 5% full cowling, caught him in the jaw. The punch wasn't powerful, didn't need to be. Bakugo was already paralyzed, already defeated. The strike was just formality, just the final statement of dominance. Bakugo collapsed, unconscious, the binding spell releasing him as he fell. Midoriya wins the sports festival. The crowd erupted, 50,000 people screaming Izuku's name, all might in the competitor's box, hands raised in victory, tears streaming. Across Japan, millions watched the green-haired boy stand victorious over his rival, and they saw a hero, a symbol in the making, a future of hope and peace. Izuku raised his uninjured hand in acknowledgement, smiling that perfect heroic smile, and the cameras captured it from every angle. In the stands, Uraraka Ochako clutched her hands over her heart, tears flowing. Deku, you did it. She was in love with a lie. They all were. The medal ceremony was All Might's moment of pride. He placed the gold medal around Izuku's neck himself, that massive hand ruffling green hair with fatherly affection. "You did it, my boy. You've shown the whole world what it means to be a hero." Izuku looked up at his mentor with shining eyes. "Only because you believed in me. Thank you." "Dad. Dad." The words slipped out so naturally, so perfectly timed, that All Might actually staggered. His eyes went wide, filled with tears, and he pulled Izuku into a crushing hug right there on the podium. "I'd be honored," Toshinori whispered, voice breaking. "Honored to be your father." The crowd awed. Cameras flashed. This moment, the symbol of peace claiming a successor, a son, would be on every front page tomorrow. Izuku hugged back, face buried in All Might's chest, and his expression was completely hidden. Good, because behind the tears and the trembling and the overwhelming emotion, Sōsuke Aizen smiled. That night, alone in his apartment, Izuku stood before the mirror and stared at his reflection. The gold medal hung around his neck, catching lamplight. He reached up slowly, running his fingers through green hair, slicking it back away from his forehead. The gesture was deliberate, transformative. His expression shifted. The nervous eyes went cold. The gentle smile faded into something knowing and superior. The slouched posture straightened into perfect predatory alignment. "Phase 1 complete," he said to his reflection. "The country loves me. All Might is emotionally dependent on me. My classmates idolize me, and they've all seen my lightning." He touched the medal, and it felt like nothing. Worthless medal, worthless achievement, worthless recognition from worthless people. Now for the tragedy. His reflection smiled, the Aizen smile, slight and knowing. Now I show them what they've created. The week after the sports festival passed in a blur of media attention and internship offers. Pro heroes across Japan had watched Izuku's performance and wanted him as a sidekick. Wanted to train the boy who might become the next symbol of peace. Izuku chose Gran Torino. The ancient hero was All Might's former teacher, a man who understood one for all better than anyone living. Officially, he was retired, living alone in a rundown apartment. Unofficially, he was still sharp, still dangerous, still capable of teaching lessons that went beyond quirk usage. "So you're Toshinori's boy," Gran Torino said, looking Izuku up and down with eyes that had seen too much. "You don't look like much." "I'll do my best to learn, sir." Izuku bowed formally. Perfect respect, perfect eagerness. Gran Torino's response was to launch himself across the room with speed that belied his age, foot aimed at Izuku's head. Izuku dodged with shunpo compressed to minimal expression. Gran Torino landed, eyes narrowed. Fast, but sloppy. Your control is garbage." The week was brutal. Gran Torino pushed Izuku beyond normal limits, forcing him to use full cowling constantly, to maintain the percentage output while moving, fighting, thinking. The training was designed to make one for all second nature, an extension of the body rather than a separate power. Izuku absorbed every lesson while secretly practicing Hado spells in the forest at night. Red and blue spiritual energy lit up the darkness as he refined Shakuho, learned Sokatsui, practiced binding techniques that this world would never recognize as anything but quirk evolution. On the third night, he stood alone under stars and extended his hand. Palm up. Hado number 33, Sokatsui. Blue fire exploded from his palm, shooting into the sky like a pillar of azure flame. The heat was intense, controlled, beautiful in its destructive potential. Izuku watched it fade and smiled. My Kido adapts faster in this world. The spiritual pressure here is different, coarser, less refined, but abundant, like switching from purified water to seawater. Less elegant, but more volume to work with. He looked at his hands, at the green lightning that flickered around his fingertips when he activated One for All. "Soon," he whispered, "soon I'll have refined both systems into something new, something beyond Shinigami, beyond hero, something transcendent." His phone buzzed. A message from All Might. "How's the training going, my boy?" Izuku typed back, "It's hard, but I'm learning so much. Gran Torino is an amazing teacher. Thank you for arranging this." All Might's response was immediate. "I'm so proud of you. Stay safe." Izuku stared at the message, at the genuine care and affection in those simple words, and felt absolutely nothing. He pocketed the phone and returned to his training. Hosu City burned. The hero killer Stain had chosen this night to make his statement, to cull the false heroes who wore their titles like costumes without understanding the weight. His blades had already claimed 3 pros, their bodies cooling in alleyways while the killer moved to his next target. Izuku stood on a rooftop, overlooking the chaos, having used his internship's patrol route to position himself perfectly. Below, fires spread from villain attacks. Stain's assault had drawn out every hero in the city, creating exactly the kind of chaos the League of Villains wanted. Convenient timing, Izuku thought. The League's Nomu attack, Stain's rampage, all happening simultaneously. Either coordination or exploitation of opportunity. Either way, useful. His phone buzzed. Emergency alert, villain attack, multiple locations, all heroes to respond. Izuku's expression shifted to concern. He activated full cowling and leaped from the rooftop, appearing to rush toward danger with heroic urgency. He found Ida first. The speedster was in an alley, confronting Stain over the paralyzed body of the hero native. Ida's engine screamed as he charged, but Stain was faster, more experienced. A blade slashed across Ida's arm, and the paralysis quirk activated instantly. Ida collapsed, unable to move, staring up at the hero killer with rage and helplessness. False hero, Stain hissed, raising his blade for the killing blow. You seek vengeance, not justice. You don't deserve the title. Stop! Izuku appeared at the alley's entrance, full cowling blazing, expression determined and heroic. Stain's eyes narrowed, assessing this new threat. Another false hero? How many must I kill before? You're wrong about heroes, Izuku interrupted, stepping forward slowly. You see corruption and assume everyone is corrupt. You see fakes and think there are no real heroes left. Stain paused, blade still raised. Prove me wrong, boy. All Might is real, Izuku said simply. He saves people not for money or fame, but because it's right, and there are others like him. Not many, maybe, but they exist. Stain studied him for a long moment. You might be genuine. I see it in your eyes, the desire to save, not to profit. What you see is what I want you to see, Aizen thought behind Midoriya's earnest expression. Your ideology is interesting, but ultimately self-defeating. You can't fix a broken system by killing individuals. You need to change the foundation itself. But your friend here, Stain gestured at Ida, he's here for revenge, for his brother. That's not heroism. Todoroki appeared in a burst of ice and fire, joining Izuku. That's friendship, the dual quirk user said coldly. We protect our own. The fight that followed was fast, brutal, efficient. Stain was skilled beyond normal parameters. Decades of combat experience, tactical genius, a quirk that could paralyze with a single taste of blood. Against most heroes, he was unbeatable. Against Izuku, he was interesting. Izuku fought with full cowling at 8%, enough to keep pace with Stain's speed without revealing the true depths of his power. He let Todoroki take the lead in offense, ice and fire creating environmental hazards that Stain had to navigate. But when Stain lunged with his blade aimed at Todoroki's throat, Izuku moved with Shunpo, appearing between them in a blur of green lightning. His hand shot out, catching Stain's wrist. Bakudo number 1. Sigh. The hero killer's arms snapped behind his back, locked by invisible force that he couldn't see or understand. His eyes widened with shock and confusion. What? How? Izuku's other hand jabbed forward, striking a precise nerve cluster. Stain collapsed, conscious but paralyzed by his own quirk as Izuku deliberately drew blood and licked it with the tip of his tongue. Poetic justice. Praz arrived moments later, Endeavor leading them, flames blazing. They found 3 students standing over the defeated hero killer, victorious despite their youth. Todoroki's father looked at his son with something almost resembling pride. Shoto, you did well, Todoroki just nodded, expression neutral. Izuku knelt beside Ida, helping him sit up as the paralysis wore off. Are you okay, Ida-kun? Ida's eyes were wet with tears of shame and gratitude. I almost got us killed. I came here for revenge, just like he said. I'm not worthy of being a hero. You made a mistake, Izuku said gently, but you didn't make it alone. We're here together. That's what friends do. They stop each other from making fatal errors. Ida grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. Thank you, Midoriya. I won't forget this. Another thread, Aizen noted. Another bond forged through manufactured crisis. The aftermath was messy. Media coverage, police reports, lectures from pro-heroes about students engaging in combat without authorization. But the narrative that emerged was clear. 3 first-year UA students had defeated the hero killer Stain, saving multiple lives and ending a reign of terror. Izuku's name was on every news site again. The boy who'd won the sports festival had now helped capture one of Japan's most dangerous villains. His popularity soared. And with it, Kyōka Suigetsu's web spread wider, encompassing every person who watched the news footage of green lightning flashing in that Hosu alley. Final exams arrived with Aizawa's cruel smile. You'll be fighting in pairs against pro heroes. Consider this a practical test of everything you've learned. Izuku got paired with Bakugo against All Might. The irony was almost painful. They stood at the starting line of an urban training ground, the symbol of peace waiting at the exit point with that massive grin and overwhelming presence that made the air itself feel heavier. Young Midoriya, young Bakugo, you'll have to work together to either capture me or escape. I won't hold back. Bakugo's hands sparked with barely suppressed rage. Being paired with Deku was insulting enough. Being expected to cooperate with him was unbearable. I don't need this loser's help. Bakugo's, I'll beat All Might myself. Izuku said nothing, just watched All Might with analytical eyes, calculating power output, movement patterns, the way the symbol of peace's muscles tensed before action. Begin. Bakugo exploded forward, launching himself at All Might with reckless aggression. The symbol of peace simply swatted him aside like an annoying insect, sending the explosive hero tumbling across pavement. You'll need more than that, young Bakugo. Izuku moved, not toward All Might, but toward the exit, using full cowling to sprint through back alleys and side streets. Bakugo noticed, screaming, "Deku! Where are you going, you coward?" But Izuku kept running, and All Might, bound by the exam's rules to prevent escape, had to give chase. The symbol of peace was fast. Faster than any student, faster than most pros. He closed the distance in seconds, massive fist raised to slam into the ground ahead of Izuku and cut off his path. Izuku shunpoed backward at the last moment, and All Might's punch cratered the street, creating a shockwave that shattered windows. "Good dodge, my boy. But you can't run forever." "I know," Izuku said quietly. "Kachan, now!" Bakugo, who'd been circling around during the chase, appeared from above with a massive explosion, his ultimate move, the one he'd been developing since the sports festival. Boom! The blast hit All Might square in the back, and even the symbol of peace staggered from the impact. Excellent teamwork. All Might laughed, steam hissing from his body. But not enough. He grabbed Bakugo mid-fall and threw him at Izuku like a explosive missile. The two students collided in a tangle of limbs and cursing. Work together. All Might's voice boomed. Heroes support each other. They don't. Bakudama 61, Rikujo Koro. 6 beams of light pierced All Might's torso, locking the symbol of peace in place. His eyes widened with genuine shock as he found himself paralyzed, unable to move, unable to break free despite his immense strength. What? What is this? Izuku stood slowly, expression carefully neutral. A support item, All Might. One I've been developing. Lie. But a believable one, given this world's technology. Bakugo stared, mouth hanging open. How did you... What the hell is that? Kachan, the handcuffs. Quickly. Bakugo's brain stuttered between rage and confusion, but training kicked in. He grabbed the capture cuffs from his belt and slapped them on All Might's wrists while the symbol was still paralyzed. The binding spell released. All Might remained cuffed, officially captured. Students win. Aizawa's voice echoed over the PA system. Silence fell over the training ground. Then All Might started laughing. Huge, booming laughter full of genuine pride and joy. Wonderful. Young Midoriya. That was brilliant strategy. Using teamwork, tactics, and creative thinking to overcome a stronger opponent. That's what being a hero is all about. He ruffled Izuku's hair with cuffed hands, beaming with fatherly pride. I'm so proud of you, my boy. So very proud. Izuku smiled up at him, shy, embarrassed, grateful. Thank you, Dad. All Might's expression melted into pure emotional devastation. He pulled Izuku into a one-armed hug, tears actually flowing. You keep calling me that, and I keep loving it more, each time. Bakugo stood off to the side, staring at the scene with an expression caught between nausea and existential confusion. Something was wrong here. Something about Deku, about how he moved, how he planned, how he just bound the symbol of peace with some kind of quirk or tech that shouldn't exist. But when Bakugo tried to put it into words, to articulate the wrongness, it slipped away like water through fingers. The hypnosis wouldn't let him see. Summer training camp approached with excitement and nervous energy. Class 1A would spend a week in the mountains, training their quirks beyond normal limits, preparing for their provisional hero licenses. The bus ride was loud, chaotic, full of teenage energy. Izuku sat by the window, pretending to sleep while listening to his classmates chatter. Uraraka sat across from him, stealing glances every few minutes, her face flushing pink each time. She'd been working up courage for weeks now, trying to find the perfect moment to confess her feelings. She'll choose tonight, Aizen predicted, analyzing her behavior patterns. First night of camp, under stars, romantic setting. Textbook, adolescent confession scenario. He was right. After dinner, after the initial training session where everyone had been exhausted into groaning heaps, Uraraka found him sitting alone at the forest's edge looking up at stars. "Deku-kun, can we talk?" Izuku turned, giving her a gentle smile. "Of course, Uraraka-san. What's on your mind?" She sat beside him, hands ringing nervously in her lap. The sunset painted her face in orange and gold, and her brown eyes reflected starlight when she finally looked at him. I wanted to tell you something. I've been wanting to say it for a while now, but I kept chickening out, and I thought maybe if I waited, I'd find the perfect moment. But I realized there's no perfect moment, there's just now. So I'm going to say it now before I lose my nerve again. She took a deep breath. "Deku-kun, I really like you, not just as a friend or a classmate. I like you. I have since the entrance exam when you saved me from the zero-pointer, and every day since then I've just fallen more and more in..." The forest exploded, black smoke poured from the trees. Flames erupted across the mountainside. Villains emerged from the darkness like nightmares made flesh. Dabi's blue fire, Toga's giggles, Twice's schizophrenic rambling. The League of Villains had come to destroy everything. Uraraka's confession died on her lips as Pixie Bob's voice screamed across the camp, "Villain attack! All students to defensive positions." Chaos erupted. Class 1A scattered, pro-heroes engaged the attackers, and in the confusion, no one noticed when Izuku's expression went completely flat. Perfect timing, he thought coldly. Either coincidence or the universe has a sense of humor. "Uraraka-san, get back to the others." He grabbed her hand, eyes wide with heroic urgency. "I'll hold them off." "But Deku-kun, go!" He pushed her toward safety, then turned to face the approaching villains with full cowling blazing. She ran, tears streaming, looking back once to see him standing alone against a tide of enemies. He's so brave, she thought. So heroic. I love him so much. She had no idea that the boy she loved would be dead by sunrise. Or so she would believe. Izuku ran through the burning forest, ostensibly searching for scattered classmates, actually positioning himself for the next phase. Villain encounters were brief. Efficient, a shunpo dodge here, a calculated punch there. Each opponent fell without seeing what truly hit them. He found Kota at the cliff overlook, same as before, except this time Muscular was already there, grinning with bloodlust. A brat! Perfect warm-up. The massive villain lunged, muscle fibers bulging grotesquely. Kota screamed, frozen in terror. Izuku appeared between them with Shunpo, catching Muscular's punch with one hand. The villain's eyes widened. "What the? You're just a kid. How are you?" Bakudo 61, Rikujo Koro. 6 beams of light pierced Muscular's torso. The villain's eyes bulged as he found himself completely paralyzed, locked in place by spiritual energy he couldn't comprehend. Izuku's expression was empty. Cold. The mask had dropped completely because only one witness remained, a traumatized child whose testimony would be dismissed as shock-induced hallucination. "Fascinating," Izuku said clinically, examining Granite. "Muscular like a specimen. Your quirk grants enhanced muscle fiber density, but your spiritual pressure is pathetic. You were never a threat." Kota stared, trembling. "Who are you?" Izuku turned, and for a moment the child saw it, the predator behind the hero's mask. Eyes like winter, expression like a god examining insects, then footsteps, voices shouting, "Midoriya! Kota!" Aizawa, Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, running toward the cliff. Izuku's eyes sharpened. Perfect timing. He looked at Kota. "Close your eyes." The child, terrified beyond rational thought, obeyed. Izuku released Muscular from the binding spell. The villain gasped, lunging forward with rage-fueled strength, and Izuku whispered, so softly that only the universe heard, "Kyōka Suigetsu." Reality shattered like glass. The world inverted, refracted, rewrote itself according to Aizen's will. What happened next in objective truth and what the witnesses perceived diverged completely. Objective truth, Izuku sidestepped Muscular's punch with Shunpo. His hand shot forward. Hado number 31, Shakaho, and red spiritual energy vaporized the villain's chest cavity. Muscular died instantly, eyes wide with shock before his body even hit the ground. Izuku caught Kota before the child could see the corpse. "Sleep," he whispered, using a minor bakudo to induce unconsciousness. The boy slumped in his arms. Then Izuku turned to the approaching heroes and students, and with surgical precision, used a sharp rock to inflict wounds on his own body. Shallow cuts on his arms, a deeper gash on his leg, bruising on his ribs. He positioned Muscular's corpse to look like an explosion-based death, then laid down exactly where the witnesses would find him perceived reality, Kyōka Suigetsu's illusion. Aizawa and the students arrived to see a horrific sight. Izuku was on the ground, chest completely caved in, blood pouring from his mouth and wounds. Muscular stood over him, fist still smoking with the impact that had clearly crushed the boy's torso. "Deku!" Uraraka screamed. She ran forward, dropping to her knees, cradling his head. "No, no, no, no! Deku!" Izuku's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, glazing over. Blood bubbled from his lips. Uraraka, son, don't talk. Don't talk. We'll get recovery, girl. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay." His hand reached up weakly, touching her cheek with blood-stained fingers. "I'm glad I could save him." His smile was weak, fading. "You're crying again. Sorry." Tears streamed down Uraraka's face, dripping onto his. "Don't apologize. You're a hero. You're the best hero. You're my hero." Izuku's hand fell limp. His chest stopped moving. His eyes stared at nothing. "Deku! Deku, no! Somebody help him!" Aizawa pushed through, checking for pulse with trembling fingers. His face went ashen. He's gone. The words hit like physical blows. Todoroki froze mid-step. Ida's engines sputtered and died. In the bushes nearby, Bakugo and Kirishima had been hiding from villains, and they watched Deku's body go limp. Something inside Bakugo shattered. Muscular laughed, the sound echoing across the cliff. "One down. Weak little heroes, thinking you can..." Aizawa's capture weapon lashed out, wrapping around the villain's throat. The teacher's eyes were red with rage and grief, tears streaming down his face as he strangled the murderer. "You monster!" Todoroki's ice exploded from the ground, freezing Muscular solid. Aizawa released him only so the ice could encase him completely. The villain would survive to stand trial, but only barely. Uraraka held Izuku's body, rocking back and forth, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. No, please. Deku, wake up. Please wake up." Kota was unconscious nearby, untouched, saved by the boy who'd given his life. The hero students stood in shocked silence, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Their friend, their classmate, the boy who'd won the sports festival and captured the hero killer, dead. Killed saving a child he didn't even know. Actual reality. Izuku lay on the ground, very much alive, maintaining perfect stillness while his spiritual pressure sustained the elaborate illusion. Every witness saw their worst nightmare, the death of their friend, their hope, their future symbol of peace. And so the tragedy begins, Aizen thought, feeling Uraraka's tears fall on his face. Let them grieve. Let them break. The deeper the wound, the more devastating the reveal. The aftermath was chaos transformed into mourning. Recovery girl was called immediately, but when she arrived and checked the body, her face crumpled with grief. "I'm sorry. He's gone. My quirk can't revive the dead." Kota woke screaming about monsters and heroes and green lightning, his testimony fragmented and inconsistent. The adults assumed he was traumatized, confused by shock. They sedated him gently. The League of Villains retreated through Kurogiri's portal, their primary target, Bakugo, successfully captured. But the victory felt hollow in the face of what they'd lost. Class 1A was evacuated to UA immediately. The bus ride back was silent except for crying. Uraraka sat in the back, staring at nothing, tears flowing endlessly. Todoroki stared out the window with expression carved from ice. Ida's hands trembled. Bakugo was missing, taken by villains. Izuku was dead, killed by them. The class had lost 2 in one night. All Might arrived at UA as the students disembarked, his skinny form running despite the pain it caused. "Where is he? Where's young Midoriya?" Aizawa met him at the gate, and the look on the teacher's face said everything. "No." All Might's voice broke. "No, not him. Not my boy. I'm sorry, Toshinori. He saved a child, but the injuries were too severe. He died a hero." All Might collapsed. The symbol of peace, the strongest man alive, fell to his knees on UA's front steps and wailed. The sound was inhuman, primal, a father's grief given voice. Students nearby started crying harder, triggered by seeing their invincible symbol broken. Toshinori punched the ground, cracking concrete. I was supposed to protect him. I was supposed to keep him safe. He was my son. The last word was a scream that echoed across the campus. Inko Midoriya received the news at home. The phone call from Aizawa, gentle and professional and devastated. Miss Midoriya, I'm so sorry. Your son, Izuku, he died saving another child's life. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just stood there holding the phone, her mind refusing to process the information. Then she collapsed, and neighbors had to call an ambulance. The media coverage was massive. UA student killed in villain attack. Izuku's face plastered across every screen, every newspaper, every website. The boy who'd won the sports festival, who'd helped capture Stain, who'd been All Might's chosen successor, dead at 15. The funeral was held 3 days later. Closed casket, because the injuries were too severe for open viewing. All Might gave the eulogy, his voice breaking every few words, barely able to speak through the grief. Izuku Midoriya he was the kind of hero this world needs. Selfless, brave, kind. He saved a child he didn't know, gave his life without hesitation, and in doing so, showed us all what true heroism means. Toshinori looked at the casket, at the symbol of his failure to protect what he loved most. I'm sorry, my boy. I failed you. I wasn't there when you needed me most. I hope you can forgive me. He broke down completely, unable to continue. Inko Midoriya sat in the front row, catatonic. Her baby was gone. Her precious boy who'd only wanted to be a hero to save people with a smile. Gone. Class 1A sat together, dressed in black. Uraraka hadn't eaten in 3 days, hadn't slept, too numb to function. When they asked her to speak, to say goodbye, she tried. She walked to the podium, looked at the casket, and her voice cracked. Deku-kun, I never got to tell you. Ilo. She couldn't finish. The words died in a sob, and Tsuyu had to help her back to her seat. Bakugo, recently rescued from the League of Villains, stood at the back, refusing to sit. His hands were clenched so tight his palms bled. His face was a mask of rage and guilt and grief all twisted together into something unbearable. I never got to beat him, he thought. I never got to prove I was better. I never got to tell him. Deku, you fucking idiot. They lowered the casket into the ground, All Might threw the first handful of dirt, the sound of earth on wood hollow and final. One by one, students followed. Uraraka dropped a flower, Todoroki ice crystals, Ida his glasses cleaned and folded in respect. When the last person left, when the grave was filled and marked with a simple stone, Izuku Midoriya hero, the cemetery fell silent. And in that silence, deep underground where illusion shouldn't be able to reach, the corpse in the casket remained perfectly still. Because it wasn't a corpse at all. Just water, shaped by Kyōka Suigetsu to look, feel, smell like flesh. A perfect imitation that even Recovery Girl's medical examination couldn't distinguish from reality. The real Izuku stood miles away, watching the funeral through a villain's captured phone, his expression completely empty. And so they mourn, he whispered. And so the wound festers, and when I return, when they see what they've lost standing before them alive, his lips curved into the Aizen's smile. The despair will be exquisite. 1 week passed, All Might stopped harrowing completely. His embers had burned out fighting All for One after Bakugo's rescue, but even if he'd had power remaining, he couldn't bring himself to smile. The symbol of peace retired not in glory, but in broken grief. Class 1A returned to school in mourning. An empty desk sat in the classroom where Izuku used to sit. No one could bring themselves to move it. Uraraka came to class every day, sat at her desk, stared at that empty chair, and cried silently through lessons. Teachers pretended not to notice. Bakugo became more withdrawn, more violent in training. He pushed himself beyond safe limits, as if punishing himself for failures he couldn't articulate. Todoroki asked his father during a rare conversation, "How do you keep going when you lose someone important?" Endeavor had no answer. The hero world mourned. Pro heroes who'd never met Izuku sent condolences. Students at other schools wore black armbands. Memorials appeared across the country, impromptu shrines to the boy who'd become a symbol of youthful heroism. And then came Kamino Ward. The final confrontation between All Might and All for One, broadcast live across Japan. The symbol of peace burned his last embers, defeating the Demon King, and the nation watched their protector fade into mortality. All Might stood victorious but finished, pointing at the camera with tears in his eyes. Young Midoriya, I did it. I defeated him. I hope, wherever you are, you're proud of me. The country wept. Their symbol was gone. The boy who would have replaced him was dead. Hope itself seemed to die. But then, 3 days after All Might's retirement, Camino Ward, reconstruction site, evening. The heroes were there, Endeavor, Edgeshot, Gran Torino, others. Reporters, civilians paying respects to where the great battle had occurred. The air changed, that presence, that pressure. Invisible, crushing, suffocating. Pro-heroes dropped to their knees. Endeavor gasped, "What is this?" Gran Torino's eyes widened with recognition and horror. This spiritual pressure, it's like that time in the forest, but stronger. So much stronger. From the ruined street, a voice. Calm, elegant, amused. My, what a chaotic scene. Everyone looked. Standing on a floating piece of rubble, bathed in moonlight, was Izuku Midoriya, alive. He wore his UA uniform, but the tie was loose, collar popped. Barefoot, his green hair was slicked back completely, revealing his entire forehead for the first time. His eyes were sharp, cold, predatory, and he smiled. The Aizen smile. All Might was there, had come to pay respects to the battlefield where he'd won his last fight. His skeletal form stared up at the impossible sight, brain refusing to process. Young Midoriya? You're alive? Silence. Izuku tilted his head, and when he spoke, his voice was different. No stutter. No nervousness. Just cold, analytical certainty. Alive? All Might. When did you ever confirm I was dead? The question hit like a hammer. Uraraka was there, had come with some of Class 1A to see where All Might had fought. She stared up at Deku with expression caught between hope and confusion. Deku. Izuku's gaze swept across them. All Might, Endeavor, Uraraka, Todoroki, Ida, Bakugo. All the pieces on his board finally assembled. You look confused. Let me clarify. He reached up, running his fingers through his slicked back hair in a gesture that was pure theater, pure dominance. Since when were you under the impression that I was quirkless? Crack. Reality shattered like glass. The memory of the funeral dissolved. The corpse in the casket turned to water and mist, exposed as illusion. The image of muscular crushing Izuku rewound and pixelated, revealing muscular frozen by Bakudo, Izuku standing over him completely unharmed. Uraraka's mind broke. No, I held him. He was dead. I felt his blood. I saw him die. Izuku's voice echoed across Camino Ward, amplified by spiritual pressure. You saw what I wanted you to see. He stepped off the rubble, descending slowly through air as if walking down invisible stairs. Green lightning crackled around him, but now it looked different, wrong, sinister. Every time you witnessed my quirk's activation, every flash of green light, you fell deeper under my complete hypnosis. I have controlled your 5 senses since the entrance exam. Everything you believed about Izuku Midoriya was a carefully constructed illusion. Todoroki's voice was hollow. That's impossible. Izuku glanced at him. Is it, Todoroki? Tell me, do you remember the sports festival? Do you remember why you used your fire? Was it your choice? Or did I tell you to? Todoroki's face went pale as memories recontextualized themselves. The encouragement, the philosophical argument, the way Izuku had pushed him to use his fire. Had it been support or manipulation? Izuku turned to All for One. The Demon King was there, imprisoned but conscious, watching with fascination. You. All for One. You've gathered an impressive collection of quirks, but you're sloppy, undisciplined. You tried to create something transcendent through crude fusion. All for One laughed weakly. Bold words, child. But you're just... Izuku raised a single finger. Hado number 90, Kurohitsugi. Black spiritual energy erupted from the ground, forming a massive coffin-like box around All for One. The Demon King screamed as the spell crushed him from all sides with gravitational force that should not exist in this world. The black box imploded, and when it dissipated, All for One was dead, defeated in one move. Absolute silence. Every hero stared, every camera captured. Every witness to this moment felt their understanding of reality crack. All Might's voice trembled. What are you? Izuku looked at his mentor, no, his pawn, and the pity in his eyes was crushing. I am disappointed, All Might. I thought you were perceptive. Did you truly believe a quirkless boy could master One for All in 10 months? Did you not question how I predicted villain movements, how I never panicked, how I was always 3 steps ahead? All Might's hands shook. Everything was a lie? Izuku's expression became cold, empty. I never lied, All Might. I simply showed you what you wanted to see. You wanted a successor who idolized you, who needed you, who would carry your dream. So I became that boy. He spread his arms and the gesture was mocking, theatrical. The stuttering, the tears, the notebooks filled with hero analysis, the desperate fanboy who clung to your leg and begged for validation. That was the lie. I crafted Izuku Midoriya as a mask to manipulate you into giving me one for all. All Might fell to his knees. Why? Why did you need it? Izuku looked up at the sky and a column of green and white light began to surround him, lifting him higher into the air. In my previous life, I sought to transcend the limits of Shinigami and Hollow, to stand above Soul Society itself. I was stopped, sealed. But death is not an end, it is a doorway. He looked down at them and his expression was that of a god looking at insects. I was reborn in this world and I saw the same structure, a society built on a flawed system, held together by one man's symbol, and I realized this world needs what Soul Society needed, someone to stand at the top, someone to end the chaotic cycle. Uraraka, tears streaming, screamed, "What about us? What about Class 1A? Were we just tools to you?" Izuku's gaze landed on her, and for a moment, just a moment, something flickered. Not regret. Acknowledgement. Uraraka Ochako, you were useful. Your admiration helped solidify my hero persona. Your emotions were predictable, and I used them. She collapsed, sobbing. But do not misunderstand, Izuku continued, voice gentle now, almost kind. I never hated you. I simply never cared. Bakugo stumbled forward, explosions popping from his hands, face twisted with rage and denial. Deku, you bastard! Fight me! I'll kill you! Izuku didn't even look at him. Bakugo Katsuki, you bullied me for years and I allowed it. Do you know why? Because your inferiority complex made you loud, obvious, easy to predict. You were never a threat, you were a convenience. Bakugo screamed, launching himself with explosions. Izuku waved his hand. Bakudo number 1, sigh, and Bakugo's arms locked behind his back. He crashed to the ground, immobilized, tears of rage streaming. All Might struggled to stand, his emaciated body trembling. Izuku, if you ever cared, even a little, please, don't do this. The light around Izuku intensified, lifting him higher into the sky. His ascension was literal and metaphorical, rising above them all. I will give you one truth, All Might. His voice echoed across Kamino Ward, across Japan, across every screen broadcasting this moment. You asked if I ever cared. The answer is no. But you were the first person in this world to see potential in Izuku Midoriya. For that, I will allow you to live and witness what comes next. The light engulfed him completely. For 14 years, I wore the mask of a hero. For 14 years, I let you believe in a dream. But dreams end, illusions shatter. No one has ever stood at the true top of this world. Not All Might. Not All for One. The throne has been empty, and you've all been scrambling in the dirt beneath it, believing yourselves significant. But the unbearable vacancy of the throne in this world ends now. The light exploded outward, and when it faded, Izuku was gone, vanished into the sky like he'd never existed. His final words lingered like a curse. From this day forth, I will stand in the heavens, and when I am done, you will understand there was never a symbol of peace. There was only me, wearing his smile like a mask. And now that the mask is gone, you will know true despair. Silence. Then Uraraka screamed. A sound of absolute psychological break, of hope shattered so completely that nothing remained but void. She collapsed, and Tsuyu caught her, both girls crying. All Might stared at the sky where his son had vanished, and something inside the symbol of peace, already dying, already broken, finally gave up completely. I failed everyone, he whispered. I gave the world's most dangerous power to its greatest monster, because I wanted a son, because I was lonely, and now... He looked at his hands, at the empty air where green lightning used to dance. God help us all. Bakugo lay on the ground, still bound, tears streaming into the dirt. I knew, he whispered. I always knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to see it, didn't want to admit that Deku, that he was. The word died unspoken. Monster. Across Japan, millions had watched the broadcast. The return of the dead boy, the revelation of betrayal, the casual defeat of All for One, the ascension into light. They'd seen their future symbol of peace reveal himself as something far more terrifying. And in living rooms and offices and streets across the country, people realized They had no idea what was coming next. In an undisclosed location, Izuku stood on a balcony overlooking a city at night. Alone, the mask completely gone. He looked at his hand, green lightning crackling around fingers that had fooled the world. One for All has integrated fully with my spiritual power. The Hogyoku is complete. Now, the real work begins. He smiled, not the Aizen smile, but something more genuine, more terrifying. This world will know order. This world will know perfection. And when they look up from their chaos and suffering, they will see me standing at the top and they will understand. The smile widened. I am inevitable. He turned from the balcony, walking into shadow, and the city lights reflected off his slicked back hair like a halo. Sōsuke Aizen, reborn as Izuku Midoriya, had spent 14 years building the perfect deception. Now came the perfect dominion. And there was no symbol of peace left to stop him. The throne of heaven awaited its king. And Izuku Midoriya, who had never existed except as a mask worn by a god, was ready to claim it. The tragedy was complete, the despair exquisite, and in the ruins of their broken hope, humanity would learn what it meant to worship a false idol. They would learn what it meant to love a lie. They would learn what it meant to stand beneath the gaze of someone who had transcended them so completely that their struggles, their dreams, their very existence meant nothing at all. This was the story of how Izuku Midoriya died before he was ever truly born. This was the story of how Sōsuke Aizen conquered a world by making it love him. This was the story of the greatest deception in history. And it was only the beginning. Izuku stood on the balcony of his hidden sanctuary, a penthouse apartment in a district of Tokyo that no longer existed on any map, erased from records and memory through careful application of spiritual pressure and strategic hypnosis. Below, the city sprawled in organized chaos, emergency vehicles with sirens screaming, news helicopters circling like carrion birds, crowds gathering in streets to stare at screens showing his face, his revelation, his ascension. The nation had fractured in the 3 hours since Kamino Ward. Some believed the government's desperate lies about villain quirks and compromised students. Most knew better. They'd seen the truth in his eyes, heard it in his voice, felt it in the weight of his presence transmitted through every camera, every screen, every witness who'd watched him dismantle their symbol of peace with nothing but words and reality itself. The Hogyoku pulsed within his chest, not yet complete but growing stronger with each passing moment, feeding on the collective spiritual energy of millions, whose faith in heroes had transformed into despair, whose hope had curdled into fear, whose belief in Izuku Midoriya's heroism now fueled the very power that would destroy the world they knew. He could feel them all, every soul who'd witnessed his green lightning, every person who'd cheered at the sports festival, every child who'd looked at posters of the smiling boy who'd won their hearts. They were all connected. They were all connected to him now through Kyōka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis. Invisible threads binding them to his will whether they knew it or not, and their unconscious spiritual energy flowed into him like a river feeding an ocean that had no bottom, no shore, no end. The news is calling you the betrayer hero, a voice said from the shadows. Izuku didn't turn. He'd sensed the presence minutes ago, allowed the intrusion because it amused him. How prosaic. I expected better from Japan's media infrastructure. Kurogiri materialized from purple-black mist, his yellow eyes studying Izuku with what might have been professional respect. Behind him, the rest of the League of Villains emerged, Shigaraki Tomura scratching his neck compulsively, Dabi with hands in pockets and expression carefully neutral, Toga Himiko bouncing on her heels with manic energy barely contained, twice arguing with himself in whispered fragments. "We need to talk," Shigaraki said, his voice rough with suppressed rage. "You used us. The USJ attack, the training camp, all of it. You were manipulating us from the start, weren't you?" "Yes," Izuku replied simply, finally turning to face them. His expression held no apology, no guilt, just acknowledgement of fact. "Your attack on the USJ provided the perfect catalyst for me to demonstrate heroism under pressure. The training camp gave me opportunity to stage my death and measure the depth of attachment my classmates had developed. You served your purposes adequately." Dabi's flames flickered to life around his hands. "Adequately? We're not your fucking puppets. Aren't you?" Izuku's eyes met Dabi's, and the flames guttered out as if snuffed by invisible wind. You, Tuya Todoroki, burning yourself alive to spite a father who doesn't care enough to be hurt by your rebellion. Toga, chasing intimacy through violence because you were never taught that love doesn't require consumption. Twice, fragmenting into multiple selves because the original was too broken to bear existence alone. Shigaraki, scratching at your neck where your father's hand used to rest, playing at villainy because All for One gave you purpose when you had none. Each observation landed like a physical blow. Toga's smile faltered. Twice stopped arguing with himself. Shigaraki's hand froze mid-scratch. I see you, Izuku continued softly. All of you. Your traumas, your patterns, your predictable responses to stimulus. You think you're villains, but you're just damaged children playing dress-up with adult concepts you don't fully comprehend. The only difference between you and Class 1A is which side of the arbitrary hero-villain divide you fell on when your quirks manifested. Then why are we here? Shigaraki demanded. If we're so pathetic, so predictable, why bring us to your secret base? Izuku smiled, the Aizen smile, slight and knowing. Because I'm offering you a choice. Join me in what comes next. Serve the new order I'm constructing, and I'll give you what you actually want. Not destruction, not chaos, not revenge, but purpose. A place in a system that values strength and efficiency over arbitrary morality. And if we refuse, Dabi asked, then you'll oppose me alongside the heroes, and I'll crush you all together. The outcome doesn't change, only the side you're standing on when inevitability arrives. Silence fell over the penthouse. Outside, sirens continued their symphony. Inside, 5 villains stared at a boy who'd stopped pretending to be human and found themselves unable to dismiss his offer outright, because he was right. Everything he'd said about them was right, and that terrified them more than his power ever could. I need time to think, Shigaraki finally said. You have until dawn, Izuku replied. After that, I begin phase 2, and those who aren't with me become obstacles to be removed. Kurogiri opened a portal. The League filed through without another word, and Izuku returned his attention to the city below, to the chaos that was only beginning, to the foundation he'd laid so carefully now bearing fruit exactly as planned. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Nezu, principal of UA. We need to talk. Please. Izuku typed back, the mouse wants to negotiate. How amusing. Very well. UA's main conference room, 1 hour. Come alone? Or I'll assume you're planning something tedious and respond accordingly. He pocketed the phone and walked to his closet, selecting a fresh UA uniform. If he was going to visit his former school, he might as well look the part. The irony would be delicious. 60 minutes later, Izuku stood in UA's conference room, hands in pockets, expression calm and analytical as he studied the assembled force arrayed against him. Nezu had not come alone. Of course he hadn't. The principal was intelligent enough to know negotiation from a position of weakness was surrender by another name, and the room held Japan's remaining hero elite. All Might sat at the head of the table in his skeletal form, eyes red from crying, hands trembling with suppressed grief and rage. Endeavor stood by the window, flames barely contained, his usual composure fractured by genuine uncertainty about how to fight something that had casually destroyed Soul Reapers. Hawks perched on a chair back, feathers ruffled, his usual casual demeanor replaced with predatory focus. Aizawa leaned against the wall with arms crossed, bloodshot eyes studying his former student with professional detachment masking personal devastation. Best Genist, Mirko, Edshot, Gran Torino. They were all there, every available top-ranked hero, and their combined presence would have intimidated any normal threat. Izuku smiled at them. This is quite the welcoming committee. I'm flattered. Sit down, Midoriya-kun, Nezu said calmly, gesturing to an empty chair across from him. We have much to discuss. Do we? Izuku remained standing, deliberately disrespecting the implicit power dynamics the seating arrangement was meant to establish. I believe I made my position clear at Kamino Ward. There's nothing to negotiate. The world as you knew it has ended. A new order is being constructed. You can accept that reality or die resisting it, but the outcome remains unchanged regardless of your choice. All Might stood abruptly, chair scraping backward. How can you say that? How can you stand there wearing that uniform, standing in the school where you were supposed to learn to be a hero, and talk about destroying everything we've built? Because what you've built is fundamentally broken, Izuku replied. his voice remaining calm even as All Might's rose. You created a society dependent on symbols rather than systems, on individual heroics rather than collective strength. You allowed hero work to become commodified, turned saving people into a career path complete with rankings and merchandise deals. You created an environment where someone like Bakugo Katsuki could spend 14 years tormenting a quirkless child with zero consequences because his quirk was flashy and strong. You built a world where my mother had to apologize to me for my genetics, where I was told my dreams were impossible because I lacked a specific gene mutation. That's not a civilization. That's institutionalized discrimination with a hero mascot painted over the cracks. The words hung in the air like indictments, and no one in the room could immediately refute them because they were true, uncomfortably, undeniably true. And Izuku had identified the rot at the foundation of their entire society with surgical precision. So your solution is tyranny? Endeavor growled. Replace one broken system with another? My solution is order, that Izuku corrected. Perfect. Absolute, divinely mandated order where chaos is impossible and everyone serves according to their capabilities rather than their circumstances of birth. No more random quirk manifestations determining life outcomes. No more villains created by society's failures. Just clean, efficient hierarchy with me at the apex ensuring the system functions as intended. That's fascism, Hawk said quietly. Dressed up in philosophical language, but still fascism. Call it whatever label makes you comfortable, Izuku replied. The terminology doesn't change the reality. I have the power to reshape this world. You do not. That's not philosophy. That's mathematics. Nezu's paws folded together on the table, his typically cheerful expression replaced with something far more serious. Let's speak pragmatically then. You claim to have power sufficient to enforce your vision. Demonstrate it. Show us why we should surrender rather than fight. Izuku's smile widened slightly. Very well. He raised one hand, palm up, and green lightning crackled around his fingers. But different now, wrong somehow, mixed with white and purple in colors that shouldn't exist in standard electromagnetic spectrums. The Hogyoku pulsed within his chest, visible through his uniform as a point of light that seemed to contain galaxies. Bakudo number 99, Kin. Black spiritual fabric erupted from nowhere, wrapping around every hero in the room simultaneously. All Might was pulled backward into his chair, arms locked to armrests. Endeavor's flames extinguished as the fabric constricted around his torso. Hawk's feathers clattered to the floor, paralyzed. Aizawa's capture weapon fell limp. Gran Torino couldn't move despite decades of speed-based combat experience. Every pro hero in the room was immobilized in under 2 seconds. Izuku walked slowly around the table, examining his handiwork with clinical detachment. Bakudo number 99, Kin. A binding spell from a dimensional framework you don't have the context to understand, executed through spiritual energy you can't detect, affecting you on levels your quirks weren't designed to defend against. This is what I mean by different systems. You're trying to fight a chess grandmaster while playing checkers, and the board itself is rigged against you. He stopped in front of All Might, looking down at his former mentor with empty eyes. You trained me for 10 months, spent every day believing you were molding a successor. Tell me, Toshinori, in all that time, did you ever truly see me? Or did you just see a convenient mirror reflecting your own need for legacy? All Might struggled against the bindings, veins bulging in his skeletal neck. I saw a good kid who wanted to help people. You saw a performance, Izuku interrupted. I showed you an orphaned boy desperate for a father figure, and you latched onto that fantasy because your injury left you lonely and your career left you isolated. You didn't save me, Toshinori. I saved you. From the crushing realization that you'd wasted your life maintaining a fundamentally broken system that would collapse the moment you couldn't smile anymore. Tears rolled down All Might's cheeks. I loved you, like a son. I know, Izuku said softly, and for a moment something almost like sympathy crossed his features. And that made you the perfect tool. Your love was genuine, pure, completely exploitable. Thank you for one for all, Toshinori. Your power serves a far greater purpose now than it ever did in your hands. He released the binding spell. The black fabric dissolved, freeing the heroes. They lunged forward as one, Endeavor's flames reigniting, Hawk's feathers launching. Aizawa's capture weapon unfurling, but Izuku was already gone, standing in the doorway across the room, having moved with Shunpo's speed that made their attacks hit empty air. "That was your free demonstration," he said. "Next time we meet, the bindings won't release. Consider this a courtesy extended to my former teachers. I'm giving you time to evacuate civilians, to prepare whatever desperate plan you're already formulating, to gather every hero and villain and military resource you can find. Bring everything. It won't matter, but the spectacle of unified resistance will make excellent theater for what comes after." "After what?" Nezu asked, his voice still calm despite having just witnessed his entire Security Council neutralized in seconds. Izuku's smile became something terrible and beautiful and absolutely confident. "After I tear open the dimensional barriers and reach the Soul King's palace. After I overthrow the god maintaining reality's current structure. After I claim the throne of heaven and reshape existence according to my design. You have 3 days. Use them wisely." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Oh, an endeavor? Your son Tuya is alive. He's been operating as the villain Dabi, burning himself slowly to spite you. I thought you should know before the end. Family drama always makes the final act more emotionally resonant." Endeavor's face went white. Izuku walked out, leaving chaos and revelation and despair in his wake like a god's casual footprints burning the earth. The hunt began at dawn. 50 pro heroes mobilized across Tokyo in coordinated strike teams using Hawk's intelligence network and Nezu's tactical analysis to predict Izuku's next appearance. They had 3 days before whatever he'd meant by tearing open dimensional barriers, and they intended to use every second finding and stopping him before he could execute Phase 2. The strategy was simple: locate, surround, overwhelm with numbers and firepower sufficient to breach whatever defenses he possessed, then either capture or kill, depending on resistance level. Lethal force had been authorized by the Hero Commission, an unprecedented decision that spoke to how thoroughly Izuku's revelation had shattered their confident traditional methods. They found him at midnight on day 1. An abandoned warehouse in Tokyo's industrial district, the kind of location that screamed villain hideout in its cliched obviousness, which was exactly why Izuku had chosen it. He sat in a metal folding chair in the warehouse's center, illuminated by a single hanging light, reading a book, Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil in the original German. As if waiting for a scheduled appointment rather than an execution squad, the heroes surrounded the building. 50 of Japan's finest, armed with support equipment and combination attack strategies, perfected through days of intensive planning. Endeavor stood at the front entrance, flames blazing hot enough to melt the door frame. Hawks positioned his feathers at every exit. Best Genist prepared fiber manipulation for instant restraint. Mirko waited to deliver knockout kicks if close combat became necessary. They had counter strategies for every ability he demonstrated, backup plans for scenarios they hadn't seen, and absolute determination to end this threat before it metastasized further. "Izuku Midoriya," Endeavor's voice boomed through a megaphone. "You are completely surrounded. Surrender immediately or face lethal force." Inside the warehouse, Izuku closed his book and set it carefully on the floor beside his chair. He stood, stretched like someone preparing for light exercise rather than combat against 50 professional heroes, and walked toward the front entrance with hands in pockets and expression utterly calm. He opened the door himself, stepped out into the circle of heroes with that slight smile on his face, that knowing curve that said he'd predicted this exact scenario down to the number of feathers Hawks had deployed and the angle of Endeavor's stance. "Good evening," he said pleasantly. "Right on schedule. I appreciate punctuality." "Last chance," Endeavor growled. "Hands up. Get on the ground." "No." The single word hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then Endeavor attacked, and the night exploded into chaos. Prominence burn. Endeavor's ultimate technique, flames concentrated to temperatures that could vaporize concrete, erupted from his body in a massive column of fire that consumed the warehouse entrance, the surrounding air, everything within a 20-meter radius. The heat was so intense that heroes 50 meters away had to shield their faces. The light was blinding. The sound was the roar of an angry god. When the flames cleared, Izuku stood in the center of the blast zone completely untouched, one hand raised casually, surrounded by a dome of shimmering spiritual energy that had absorbed the attack without him even needing to move. Hado number 58, Tenrun, he said, and from his palm erupted a massive tornado of wind and spiritual pressure that caught Endeavor mid-charge and threw him backward into a building 50 meters away, the impact cratering brick and leaving Japan's #1 hero groaning in debris. Hawks' feathers launched from every direction, hundreds of them, each one sharp enough to pierce steel, moving at speeds that made them nearly invisible, converging on Izuku from angles impossible to dodge simultaneously. Bakudo number 81, Danku. A massive translucent barrier materialized in the air around Izuku. The feathers struck it and simply stopped, embedded in spiritual energy that held them frozen like insects in amber. Izuku gestured, and the barrier shattered outward, sending the feathers rocketing back toward their owner with twice the original velocity. Hawks barely dodged, feathers ripping through his costume and drawing blood from a dozen shallow cuts. He pulled back, reassessing, realizing with growing horror that his ultimate technique had just been reversed against him with casual effort. Fiber manipulation. Ultimate bind. Best Jeanist's quirk activated, thousands of threads from every hero's costume simultaneously extending toward Izuku, wrapping, constricting, forming a cocoon of fabric that could restrain even All Might at peak power. The cocoon collapsed inward, and Izuku stepped out of it from behind Best Jeanist, having used Shunpo to relocate during the microsecond when the fibers blocked line of sight. His hand touched the hero's shoulder gently, almost kindly. Bakudo number 61, Rikujo Koro. 6 beams of yellow light pierced Best Jeanist's torso, locking him completely paralyzed. The hero couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stand frozen as Izuku walked past him toward the next attacker. Mirko lunged with rabbit-enhanced strength, her kick capable of shattering bank vaults. Izuku caught her ankle with one hand, and the kinetic energy of her attack simply stopped, absorbed into his spiritual pressure like water into sand. Luna Ring. She twisted, activating her ultimate technique mid-grab, spinning with momentum that should have broken his arm. Izuku released her ankle and simultaneously struck a nerve cluster in her thigh with precision that spoke to medical knowledge far beyond hero training. Mirko's leg went numb instantly. She collapsed, unable to maintain balance, and Izuku stepped over her without looking back. Edgeshot attempted a speed blitz, his body folding into paper-thin form, moving faster than sound, aiming for vital points with strikes that could pierce organs. Izuku didn't dodge, didn't block, simply stood still as Edgeshot's attacks phased through him, each strike hitting empty air despite visual confirmation of contact. Kyōka Suigetsu makes you perceive my location incorrectly. Izuku explained as Edgeshot stumbled, confused, unable to land a single hit despite perfect technique. You're attacking where you see me. I'm standing 3 meters to your left. The gap between perception and reality is unbridgeable. He pointed at Edgeshot. Hado number 31, Shakaho. Red spiritual energy exploded from his fingertip, slamming into Edgeshot and sending him rocketing backward unconscious before he hit the ground. One by one, methodically, efficiently, Izuku dismantled the assault force. A Bakudo spell here, a Hado blast there, occasional use of Shunpo to demonstrate speed they couldn't match, constant deployment of Kyōka Suigetsu to make them doubt their senses. He fought 50 professional heroes and never broke stride, never showed strain, never indicated that they posed even theoretical threat to him. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 47 heroes lay unconscious or immobilized across the industrial district. 3 had retreated when they realized the fight was unwinnable. Hawks among them, carrying an unconscious Endeavor and Best Jeanist through the sky toward emergency medical care. Izuku stood in the center of the carnage, not even breathing hard, his uniform barely disturbed. He looked at the fallen heroes with something that might have been disappointment. I expected more, he said to no one in particular. You had numerical advantage, environmental preparation, surprise tactics, combination attacks, and still you never came close. This is the difference between systems. You fight with quirks, single-dimensional powers that operate on physical laws. I fight with techniques that manipulate reality itself on spiritual, mental, and physical levels simultaneously. You were outmatched before the battle began. He walked among them, stopping occasionally to check pulses, ensuring no one had died. He didn't want fatalities yet, not until the final confrontation when their deaths would serve symbolic purpose. As he moved, he spoke, knowing that at least some of them were conscious enough to hear, that his words would be repeated, analyzed, spread. You think I'm a villain. I'm not. Villains want chaos, destruction, personal gratification at society's expense. I want the opposite. Perfect order, construction of new systems, collective elevation of humanity beyond its current limitations. The methodology is ruthless because the existing structure requires complete dismantling before reconstruction can begin. You can't renovate a building that's rotted to its foundation. You demolish it and build something better from clean ground. He stopped, looking up at the sky where stars were visible despite Tokyo's light pollution, a rare sight that felt symbolic somehow, like even the heavens were acknowledging this moment's significance. In 2 days, the dimensional barriers will weaken enough for me to force a permanent gate. I will ascend to the Soul King's palace, overthrow the god maintaining reality's current stagnant structure, and claim the throne myself. When I return, this world will operate according to new rules. Crime will be impossible, violence will be suppressed, suffering will serve purpose, and those who cooperate with the new order will find their lives infinitely improved from the chaos you currently mistake for freedom. He started walking toward the warehouse where he'd left his book, then paused, looking back at the fallen heroes one final time. Tell All Might, I'm sorry it had to be this way. Not sorry for my actions, I have no regrets, but sorry that his heart was kind enough to love something that was never truly his son. He deserved better than the role I forced him to play. Remember that when you rebuild, kindness is exploitable, love is weaponizable, and hope is the most dangerous delusion humans create. The new world won't have room for such weaknesses. He disappeared into the warehouse. By the time backup arrived, 10 minutes later, he was gone, leaving only unconscious heroes and the book he'd been reading, left deliberately on his chair, bookmark placed at a specific passage. He who fights with monsters might take care lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze for long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you. The page was annotated in Izuku's handwriting. Nietzsche was wrong. I gazed into the abyss and found it empty, so I filled it with purpose. UA's Class 1A gathered in their dormitory common room that night, lights dimmed, every student present despite the late hour because none of them could sleep, couldn't even pretend at normalcy, while the boy who'd been their friend, their classmate, their inspiration, revealed himself as something monstrous beyond their comprehension. The television played news coverage on mute, footage of unconscious heroes being loaded into ambulances, experts analyzing Izuku's abilities, politicians demanding solutions they couldn't provide. But the students weren't watching the screen. They were sitting in silence, each lost in their own processing of trauma and betrayal. Uraraka sat curled in an armchair, knees drawn to chest, staring at nothing. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, had barely drunk water, and her eyes were red-rimmed from crying until her tear ducts simply gave up producing moisture. Tsuyu sat beside her, one hand on her shoulder, providing physical comfort since words had proven inadequate. Ida paced by the window. His usual rigid posture collapsed into something hunched and defeated. Todoroki stood against the far wall, expression blank, flames unconsciously flickering from his left side as his emotional regulation failed. Bakugo was notably absent. He'd locked himself in his room after Kamino Ward and hadn't emerged since, and the sounds of explosions and screaming that occasionally filtered through his door suggested he was processing everything through the only method he knew: violence. I don't understand, Momo said quietly, breaking the silence that had lasted nearly an hour. Her voice was small, uncertain, completely unlike her usual confident leadership tone. How could we not see it? We spent months with him, trained together, ate together, lived in the same building. How did none of us realize something was wrong? Because there was nothing to see, Tokoyami replied from his corner, dark shadow unusually quiet and subdued. He showed us exactly what we wanted to see, a kind, earnest boy who worked harder than anyone else. We saw the mask and believed it was his face. But I touched him, Uraraka whispered. I held his hand at the sports festival. I hugged him after he saved me from the zero-pointer. I thought I felt genuine warmth. How can you fake that? You can't fake it, Jiro said softly, but you can simulate it if you understand human emotional responses well enough. He analyzed us the same way we'd analyze villain quirks during training, found our patterns, our triggers, our needs, and then became exactly what would exploit those weaknesses most efficiently. He knew I wanted validation, Todoroki said, his voice hollow. Knew that my father's abuse left me desperate for someone who believed in my potential independent of my quirk. So he gave me that speech at the sports festival about using my fire to surpass endeavor. Made me think it was my choice, my revelation, but he planted it, manipulated me into the decision, and let me believe it was personal growth. He knew I valued honor above all else, Ida added, stopping his pacing to lean against the wall like he could no longer support his own weight. So he positioned himself as honorable, self-sacrificing, willing to destroy his own body to save others. Made me see him as an ideal to aspire toward. And I never questioned it because the performance was so perfect. He knew I needed someone to admire, Uraraka said, tears starting again despite her body's exhaustion. Someone who represented everything good about being a hero. Someone who proved that you didn't need a powerful quirk or a famous family to be worthy of respect. He became that person, became exactly what I needed him to be. And I fell in love with a lie. Kirishima, usually the group's emotional support, had his head in his hands, elbows on knees, posture radiating defeat. What kills me is how thorough he was. Like, think about it. The entrance exam where he saved Uraraka, he could have just destroyed the zero-pointer and walked away. But he made sure to break his arm doing it, made sure witnesses saw him sacrifice himself, created this narrative of selfless heroism that everyone believed. Every choice, every action, every word was calculated to build the perfect hero persona. That level of planning, of commitment to the deception, I can't even comprehend it. It wasn't just planning, Momo said, her analytical mind working through implications even as her heart struggled with emotional processing. It was warfare, psychological warfare conducted over months, using every interaction as an opportunity to strengthen his position and weaken ours. He made us love him, made us depend on him emotionally, made himself integral to our group dynamic. And when he revealed the truth, that foundation collapsed and took our understanding of reality with it. We need to stop him, Kaminari said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Right? I mean, we can't just sit here while he does whatever he's planning to do. How? Mineta asked, and the usual comedic coward's voice was sharp with genuine fear. Did you miss the part where he took down 50 pro heroes without breaking a sweat? Hawks, Endeavor, Best Genist, these are top-tier heroes with decades of experience, and he dismantled them like they were first-year students in a practice exercise. What exactly are we supposed to do that they couldn't? Silence fell again because no one had an answer. They were 15 and 16-year-old students who'd barely completed one semester of hero training. Against someone who'd fought and defeated professional heroes, who demonstrated powers their world didn't have context for, who moved and spoke and planned with the certainty of someone who'd already accounted for every possible resistance. I'm going to kill him. The voice came from the stairwell. Bakugo stood there, having finally emerged from his room, and he looked worse than any of them had ever seen him. His eyes were red, whether from crying or rage or lack of sleep, no one could tell. His hands trembled with barely suppressed explosions. His expression was caught somewhere between absolute fury and complete devastation. Bakugo. Kirishima started. Don't, Bakugo interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. Don't try to talk me out of it. Don't give me platitudes about it not being my fault or how we couldn't have known. I did know. Somewhere deep down, I fucking knew something was wrong with Deku. The way he looked at me sometimes, like I was a bug under a microscope. The way he never got truly angry no matter what I did. The way he analyzed everything, predicted everything, was always 3 steps ahead. I knew. And I ignored it because acknowledging it would mean admitting that Quirkless Deku was smarter than me, more dangerous than me, better than me, in ways that had nothing to do with power. He walked further into the room, and students unconsciously leaned away from the barely controlled violence radiating from him. So yeah, this is partially my fault. I tormented him for 14 years and never realized I was poking a sleeping god. I called him worthless when he was probably the most dangerous person in the building. I made his cover stronger by being exactly the kind of bully he could use to appear sympathetic. I fed into his fucking plan without realizing it. Catch on. You can't blame. Watch me, Bakugo snarled. And don't call me that. That's what he calls me. What the thing pretending to be Midoriya calls me. My name is Bakugo Katsuki, and I'm gonna be the one to kill Izuku Midoriya or whatever the fuck he really is. Not because I think I can win. Not because I have a plan. But because someone has to try, and if I die trying, at least I'll die doing something instead of sitting here feeling sorry for myself. He turned toward the door. Where are you going? Todoroki asked. To train, to prepare, to get strong enough that when I face him again, maybe, I'll last more than 5 seconds before he swats me aside. It's not much, but it's more than sitting here crying about how we got manipulated. He left. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the frame. No one tried to stop him because they all understood on some level that Bakugo's way of processing trauma was through action, through training, until his body gave out and his mind stopped replaying every interaction with Deku through the new lens of absolute deception. He's going to get himself killed, Jiro said softly. Probably, Todoroki agreed. But can we really criticize him when none of us have better ideas? More silence. The television continued its muted coverage. Outside, Tokyo continued its descent into controlled chaos as the Hero Commission struggled to maintain order while their entire foundation crumbled. Inside, 15 students sat with the weight of their collective failure pressing down like atmosphere at ocean depth. I loved him, Uraraka said again, the words barely a whisper. I really, truly loved him. And that's going to haunt me forever, not just that he didn't love me back, but that the person I loved never existed at all. I gave my heart to a ghost, to a performance, to a mask that was only ever designed to use me. Tsuyu pulled her closer, and Uraraka finally broke again, sobbing into her friend's shoulder, while the rest of Class 1A sat helpless, unable to offer comfort because they were all drowning in the same revelation, the same betrayal, the same crushing understanding that they'd been pieces on a board moved by a player they'd never seen. In his room, alone in the dark, Bakugo punched the wall until his knuckles bled, then sat against it breathing hard, staring at the All Might poster on his wall. The symbol of peace who'd trained Deku, who'd given him one for all, who was just another victim of the most elaborate deception in history. I'll stop you, Bakugo whispered to the darkness. I don't care what it costs. I don't care if it kills me. I'll stop you, Deku, or I'll die trying. But deep down, in the part of himself he'd never admit existed, Bakugo knew the truth. It wouldn't matter. The war was already over. They'd just been too blind to see they'd lost before it even began. The dimensional barrier began to crack on the second day. It started with minor disturbances, spiritual entities flickering into existence at random locations across Tokyo, hollow-like creatures that phased between visibility and invisibility, attacking civilians who couldn't perceive the threat until claws ripped through them from angles physics shouldn't allow. The attacks created panic, confusion, and most importantly, they drew every available hero and military resource to contain the spreading chaos, leaving Izuku's actual location undefended because no one could spare the manpower to continue hunting him, while civilians were literally being killed by invisible monsters, exactly as he'd predicted. Izuku stood on the roof of Tokyo Tower, the city spread below him like a game board reaching its endgame, and raised both hands toward the sky. The Hogyoku blazed within his chest, nearly complete now, fed by the accumulated spiritual energy of millions, enhanced by the despair and fear his revelation had created, refined through combat against heroes and soul reapers into something approaching perfection. He could feel the dimensional barriers, could sense where they were thinnest, could identify the exact coordinates where reality's fabric had worn down enough to be torn. Hado number 88, Hiryu Gekizoku Shinten Raiho. A massive column of lightning erupted from his palms, shooting into the sky, piercing clouds, continuing upward until it struck the dimensional barrier between the human world and soul society with force that made the air itself scream. The barrier held for a moment, Centuries of accumulated spiritual pressure maintaining separation between realms then began to crack, fissures spreading across an invisible surface like a windshield hit by a stone. More, Izuku whispered, pouring additional power into the attack. Break! Break! Crack talk. The barrier shattered. A massive rift tore across the sky, purple-black energy roiling at the edges, wide enough for buildings to pass through, deep enough that anyone looking up could see into another dimension entirely. The Soul Society was visible through the gap, a city of white buildings and impossible architecture, the Seirei, where Shinigami had governed the afterlife for millennia, according to rules Izuku had once sought to overthrow and would soon rewrite completely. But the rift didn't stop there. It spread, branching, multiplying, as if the initial tier had weakened reality's structural integrity and now the whole system was collapsing. More gates opened, to Hueco Mundo, where hollows dwelled in endless desert beneath eternal night, to pocket dimensions where spiritual pressure had pooled and festered, to spaces between spaces where things that shouldn't exist waited patiently for opportunities like this. Entities poured through the gates, hundreds of hollows drawn by the sudden access to human world souls, dozens of Shinigami sent to investigate the massive spiritual pressure spike, strange creatures that defied classification, spiritual beings from dimensions even Izuku didn't fully understand, all flooding into Tokyo through the cracks he deliberately created, complete chaos, absolute pandemonium. The heroes couldn't possibly contain it all. Perfect. Izuku stood watching his handiwork with satisfaction, then turned his attention to the largest rift, the one directly connecting to the pathway toward the Soul King's palace. That was his destination. But not yet. First, he needed witnesses. Needed the world to see what came next. Needed the dramatic weight of this moment to be properly appreciated. He pulled out his phone, accessed the emergency broadcast system he'd hacked weeks ago, and activated every screen in Japan simultaneously. His face appeared on televisions, computers, phones, massive public displays, unavoidable, inescapable. Citizens of Japan, his voice echoed across the nation. What you're witnessing is the beginning of transformation. The barriers between human world and soul society have collapsed because I willed it. Spiritual entities you were never meant to perceive are now flooding your reality because I allowed it. Your heroes are overwhelmed. Your military is ineffective. Your government has no solutions because this scenario was never planned for. You are helpless. You are vulnerable. You are mine. He paused, letting that sink in, letting fear spread through every household watching. But I am not cruel. I am not arbitrary. I am order. And I'm offering a choice. Accept the new world I'm constructing, pledge loyalty to the system I will implement, and you will be protected. Your lives will improve. Your safety will be guaranteed. Your children will grow up in a world without random violence, without villain attacks, without the chaos you currently mistake for freedom. All it costs is your obedience. Another pause. Or resist. Fight. Cling to the broken system that allowed someone like me to infiltrate your most prestigious hero school, manipulate your symbol of peace, and bring your society to its knees without anyone noticing until I chose to reveal myself. That worked out so well for you the first time. His smile widened, that Aizen smile broadcasting to millions. I'm ascending now, to the Soul King's palace, to claim the throne of heaven. When I return, this world will operate under new rules. Pray that you've made the right choice by then. The broadcast cut. Screens went dark, and Izuku turned toward the largest rift, spreading his arms as spiritual pressure exploded from his body in a pillar of green and white light that shot into the sky like a beacon, like a declaration of war against reality itself. Come then, he said, speaking to the Soul Society, to the Gote 13, to whatever forces they'd send to stop him. Send your captains. Send your royal guard. Send everything you have. It won't be enough. It was never going to be enough. He stepped forward, and the pillar of light carried him upward into the rift, toward the pathway that spiraled through dimensions, toward the palace, where a mutilated god maintained the universe's structure through sheer existence. Behind him, Tokyo burned. Heroes fought impossible battles against spiritual entities. Citizens huddled in homes, making terrible calculations about whether surrendering to tyranny was preferable to dying in chaos. and Class 1A watched the broadcast from their dormitory, seeing their former friend ascend toward godhood while they stood powerless to stop him. Bakugo punched through his television screen, glass and sparks flying. Yeah, Deku! But Izuku was already gone, already rising beyond their world, already approaching the endgame of a plan that had been set in motion the moment he'd been reborn into this universe with memories of his previous life intact. The pathway to the Soul King's palace was beautiful in its alien geometry, a spiral of light and darkness intertwined. Stairs that existed in more than 3 dimensions, gravity that became optional as Izuku ascended through the space between worlds. He walked calmly, hands in pockets, expression serene, as if taking a leisurely stroll rather than staging a cosmic coup. The first opposition arrived when he was halfway up. 3 vice captains, elite Shinigami who served directly under the Gotei 13's captain-level fighters, materialized on the pathway ahead of him through Shunpo. They wore standard black robes with white haori indicating their rank, sealed Zanpakuto drawn, expressions grim with determination. Aizen Sōsuke, the lead vice captain, said, a woman with short silver hair and scars across her face that spoke to decades of combat experience. You were sealed for 20,000 years. Your return is impossible. Explain yourself before we execute you for treason. Izuku stopped walking, tilting his head with curiosity that wasn't entirely feigned. 20,000 years? Interesting. Time clearly moves differently between our dimensions. From my perspective, I died in Soul Society, was reborn in the human world approximately 15 years ago, and have been carefully preparing this moment ever since. But I appreciate the dramatic weight of your timeline. Makes my escape from eternal imprisonment seem even more impressive. This isn't a conversation, another vice captain growled, a massive man with heavily muscled build and Zanpakuto the size of a cleaver. We're here to stop your advance. Stand down or die. Izuku's smile was patient, almost kind. You don't understand yet. You're here to witness, not to fight. You're here so you can report to your captains exactly what you saw, so the Gotei 13 understands the futility of resistance before they waste resources on battle strategies that won't work. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to let you live, paralyzed by the understanding of how completely outmatched you are, so you can carry that message back to Soul Society. Arrogant. The vice captain's words cut off as Izuku moved, Shunpo at speeds that made their perception lag, appearing behind the lead vice captain before she could react, one hand touching her shoulder gently, almost intimately. Bakudo number 99 Kin. Black spiritual fabric erupted from his palm, wrapping around all 3 vice captains simultaneously, despite them being spaced 10 meters apart, binding them completely before any could activate Shikai or defensive Kido. They struggled, spiritual pressure flaring, but the binding held effortlessly. Izuku walked around them slowly, examining his handiwork like an artist assessing a sculpture. Bakudo number 99, the second highest level binding spell in the Soul Society's Kido Codex. Your resistance confirms your vice captain level. Impressive spiritual pressure, decent Kido resistance, clearly trained by competent teachers. Against any normal opponent, you'd be formidable. He stopped in front of the lead vice captain, meeting her eyes. But I'm not normal. I've transcended the Shinigami framework entirely. What you're experiencing isn't just a powerful Bakudo. It's a binding spell enhanced by the Hogyoku's evolutionary power and executed with perfect technique accumulated across lifetimes. The gap between us isn't skill or training. It's fundamental existence. You're soldiers. I'm approaching godhood. The comparison is meaningless. He gestured and the binding shifted, forcing the 3 vice captains to their knees while maintaining paralysis. Here's what you're going to do. Memorize this moment. Memorize the feeling of being completely powerless despite your rank and training. And when I release you, and I will release you, you're going to Shunpo back to the Seireite as fast as your bodies can move, and you're going to tell every captain, every seated officer, every Shinigami who will listen. Aizen has returned, and he's stronger than when he left. Tell them the seals failed. Tell them he's already halfway to the Soul King's palace. Tell them that if they value their lives, they'll stand aside and let inevitability occur. He released the binding. The fabric dissolved, freeing them. The 3 vice captains didn't immediately attack. Couldn't. Because something in Izuku's spiritual pressure, something beyond simple power, something that touched their souls directly, communicated truth they couldn't deny. Fighting him would be suicide, resisting would be pointless, and their best contribution to Soul Society's survival was exactly what he'd commanded. They shunpoed away without another word, retreating toward the Seirei, and Izuku continued his ascent. The second opposition was more formidable. A full captain-level Shinigami appeared at the pathway's three-quarter mark, materializing through shunpo with enough spiritual pressure to crack the pathway itself, fragments of light-made stairs breaking off and falling into the void below. She was tall, elegant, wearing the white captain's haori over standard robes. Her Zanpakuto already released into Shikai form, a blade made of pure ice that radiated cold enough to freeze the air into visible crystals. "Aizen Sōsuke," she said, voice like winter wind through dead branches. "I am Captain Yukimura of the 6th Division. I watched your trial, watched them seal you away, and now you return, wearing a child's face, threatening the structure of existence itself. I cannot allow you to proceed." Izuku stopped, regarding her with genuine interest. "Captain Yukimura, I don't recall you from my time in Soul Society, which means you either weren't captain level then or you've achieved Bankai in the intervening years. Either way, impressive. The Gotei 13 has clearly maintained standards." "Your compliments are worthless," she replied coldly. "You betrayed everything we stand for. You experimented on your own subordinates. You orchestrated the hollowification of our greatest warriors. You attempted to overthrow the Soul King and remake reality according to your twisted vision. You are evil, Aizen, pure, irredeemable evil, and I will stop you here." Izuku's expression softened into something almost resembling pity. Evil. That word again. Humans love moral absolutes because they simplify complex situations into comfortable narratives. But I'm not evil, Captain. I'm transcendent. And what I did in Soul Society wasn't betrayal. It was evolution. The Gotei 13 has maintained the same stagnant system for millennia, preventing growth, preventing progress, maintaining status quo because change is uncomfortable. I offered them transformation. They chose imprisonment instead. Their loss. Enough philosophy. Captain Yukimura's Zanpakuto blazed with spiritual pressure. "Face me, traitor! Bankai, Zekken Hyoketsu!" Her Zanpakuto transformed, ice spreading across the entire pathway, massive pillars erupting from nothing, the temperature dropping to sub-zero in microseconds. The Bankai's power was staggering, creating an environment where every breath crystallized, where movement became sluggish, where spiritual energy itself began to freeze. Izuku's breath misted in the sudden cold. He looked around at the ice palace Captain Yukimura had created, at the frozen architecture surrounding them, and nodded approvingly. "Beautiful. Your Bankai has clearly matured significantly since its initial release. The environmental manipulation is excellent, the spiritual pressure integration is seamless, and the thematic coherence is aesthetically pleasing. You should be proud." "I don't want your approval," she attacked, moving through her ice constructs with perfect familiarity, blades striking from angles that shouldn't exist, using the frozen environment to amplify her speed and power. Each strike carried enough force to shatter buildings, and the ice itself attacked independently, spikes shooting from every surface. Attempting to impale Izuku from all directions, he dodged with shunpo, minimal movement, each step calculated to conserve energy while avoiding lethal damage. "You're fighting well. Better than most captains I've faced. But you're making the same mistake they all did, assuming that raw power and environmental advantage are sufficient to overcome fundamental differences in comprehension." "What are you talking about?" "This." Izuku raised one hand casually. "Hado number 90, Kurohitsugi." Black spiritual energy erupted around Captain Yukimura, forming a massive coffin-shaped construct that enclosed her completely. The black box was covered in what looked like ink stains, and those stains began to glow with malevolent purple light as the spell's secondary effect activated. Inside the Kurohitsugi, Captain Yukimura felt pressure from all directions, not physical pressure, but gravitational, crushing her from every angle simultaneously, bypassing her ice armor and attacking directly at the spiritual level. She screamed, activating full Bankai power in desperate defense, ice exploding outward in attempt to break the spell. The Kurohitsugi held for 3 seconds, then imploded, crushing inward with force that should have killed anything inside. When it dissipated, Captain Yukimura was still alive, barely. Her captain's haori was shredded, her body covered in wounds from the crushing pressure, blood freezing before it could hit the ground. She collapsed to her knees, Bankai failing, reverting to sealed state as her spiritual pressure dropped below maintenance threshold. Izuku walked toward her slowly, stopping just outside arm's reach. Hado number 90. One of the highest level offensive spells in existence. I cast it without incantation, which reduces its power to approximately a third of maximum potential. And still, it defeated your fully released Bankai. Do you understand now? The gap between us isn't something training can close. It's not something determination can overcome. It's ontological, a difference in fundamental existence. Captain Yukimura looked up at him with eyes full of pain and defiance. I don't care how strong you are, you won't reach the Soul King. I will, Izuku corrected gently. I already have. You're looking at this backwards, Captain. The fight isn't whether I reach the palace. I'm already most of the way there, and nothing you've deployed has slowed me significantly. The fight is whether Soul Society accepts the new order I'll implement afterward, or whether they resist and force me to make examples. You've lost today's battle. The question is whether you'll survive the war. He gestured, and spiritual energy flowed from his hand into her wounds, not healing them exactly, but stabilizing her enough that she wouldn't die from blood loss in the next few hours. Go back. Tell the Captain Commander that Aizen is approaching the final ascent. Tell them to gather every captain-level fighter they have, every Royal Guard member, every resource they can mobilize. Bring it all. I want the spectacle to be worthy of this moment's significance. Captain Yukimura tried to speak, to protest, to maintain her defiance, but her body gave out. She collapsed fully, consciousness fading, and Izuku caught her before she could fall off the pathway into the void below. He laid her gently on the ice-covered stairs, positioned her so she wouldn't slide, then continued walking. Behind him, the ice began to melt as her Bankai's residual power faded. Ahead, the pathway continued spiraling upward toward the palace that hung in the sky like a impossible dream of architecture. And somewhere below, in both Soul Society and the human world, forces mobilized for final confrontation, gathering strength they didn't have, forming plans that wouldn't work, preparing for battle against an opponent who'd already accounted for every strategy they might employ. The endgame was approaching. And Izuku Midoriya, who had never existed except as a mask worn by a god, walked toward his throne with absolute certainty that nothing, not heroes, not Shinigami, not the combined forces of multiple dimensions, could stop him from claiming what had always been his by right of transcendent superiority. The throne awaited, and heaven would soon have a new king. The Soul King's palace materialized before Izuku like a fever dream given architecture, impossible geometry that existed in more than 3 dimensions, pillars extending infinitely in directions space shouldn't allow, walls that appeared to be simultaneously inside and outside the structure, gravity that became optional or directional based on aesthetic choice rather than physical law. It hung suspended in the space between dimensions, tethered to nothing, maintained by the sheer will and existence of the being imprisoned at its center. Izuku stood at the palace's entrance, a massive gate that looked carved from solidified light, and felt something he hadn't experienced since his reincarnation. Genuine anticipation. Not nervousness, not fear. Just the electric thrill of approaching a goal pursued across lifetimes, of standing at the threshold of transformation that would elevate him beyond all previous limitations. The gate opened. Not because he'd touched it, not because anyone had granted permission, but because the palace itself recognized what approached and understood that resistance at this stage was pointless theatrics. He stepped through into the main hall, and the architecture shifted around him. Corridors reconfiguring, rooms rotating, the entire structure adapting to his presence like a living organism, acknowledging a new, dominant presence. The Royal Guard was waiting. 5 figures stood arranged across the hall in formation that suggested both defense and ceremony. These were the Soul King's personal protectors, warriors whose sole purpose was preventing exactly what Izuku intended to accomplish, fighters so powerful that captain-level Shinigami were children by comparison. They didn't speak immediately, just studied him with expressions ranging from calm analysis to barely contained fury, The center figure stepped forward, a man with white hair, golden eyes, and an aura of absolute authority that came from millennia protecting reality's linchpin. His Zanpakuto remained sealed, but spiritual pressure radiated from him like heat from a star. "Aizen Sōsuke," he said, voice carrying weight that made the air itself feel heavier. "Your return was prophesied but not believed. The seals should have held for eternity. How did you escape?" Izuku smiled pleasantly. "I didn't escape. I died. Death is a doorway, honored guard. And what lies beyond on that door is not the ending your seals anticipated. I was reborn in a world where spiritual energy operates under different rules, where my consciousness retained all knowledge and experience while adapting to new frameworks. I grew, I evolved, I transcended the limitations that allowed you to imprison me the first time, and now I've returned to finish what I started." "Then you'll die again," another Royal Guard member said, a woman with crimson hair and twin blades that hummed with killing intent. "But permanently this time, we've prepared for your return. Trained for it. We know your techniques, your tactics, your Kyōka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis. You won't surprise us." "I don't need to surprise you," Izuku replied calmly. "You misunderstand the nature of this confrontation. Surprise is a tactic employed when victory is uncertain. I'm not here to fight cleverly or exploit weaknesses or use tricks to overcome superior opposition. I'm here because I've already transcended you. This battle's outcome was determined before you entered your defensive formation." The third Royal Guard, a massive armored figure whose sealed Zanpakuto was larger than a normal person, laughed with genuine amusement. "Arrogance. Still your defining characteristic. You were always brilliant, Aizen, but your ego blinds you to reality. You're one person. We are 5. Each of us is stronger than any Gote 13 captain. Combined, we're unstoppable. You cannot win." "Watch carefully," Izuku said softly. "I want you to understand exactly what you're facing before you die. I want the futility to be clear, so there's no confusion when I explain this to the next world's defenders." He raised his right hand, and the Hogyoku blazed to life within his chest, visible through his uniform as a point of light that contained galaxies. Spiritual pressure exploded outward from his body in waves that cracked the palace's floor, that made the air itself scream, that caused even the Royal Guard to involuntarily step backward from the sheer overwhelming weight of his presence. First fusion. Shinigami Hollow integration. His appearance transformed, white hollow armor materialized across his shoulders and chest, elegant rather than monstrous, integrated perfectly with his form. His spiritual pressure doubled, then tripled, then became something that couldn't be measured by normal metrics, because it had transcended the standard scaling system entirely. Second fusion, quirk integration. Green lightning crackled across the hollow armor, One for All's power merging with Shinigami's spiritual energy and hollow Reiatsu into something new, something that had never existed in any dimension before this moment. The combined system operated on principles the Royal Guard didn't have context for, attacked on levels they weren't trained to defend. Third fusion, Hogyoku Transcendence. The light from his chest spread, consuming his entire body, and when it faded, Izuku had evolved into something beyond classification. His green hair now glowed with inner luminescence, streaked with white and purple. His eyes had become kaleidoscopes of color that seemed to perceive more than 3 dimensions. Wings of pure spiritual energy manifested from his back. 6 of them, each one containing enough power to vaporize cities. The Royal Guard stared. For the first time in their millennia of service, they felt something they'd never experienced while protecting the Soul King. Genuine, bone-deep fear. "Now," Izuku said, his voice layered with harmonics that suggested multiple existences speaking simultaneously. "Shall we begin?" The battle lasted 4 minutes. The Royal Guard attacked as one with coordination perfected through ages of training together, their sealed Zanpakuto releasing simultaneously into Shikai, then immediately escalating to Bankai as they recognized that anything less than maximum power would be insufficient. The white-haired leader's Bankai rewrote the history of attacks, making Izuku's offensive spells never happened by retroactively editing causality. The crimson-haired woman's twin blades manipulated probability, ensuring that every strike should theoretically land with perfect accuracy. The armored giant's Bankai created infinite parallel instances of himself, attacking from all timelines simultaneously. The fourth guard manipulated the palace's structure itself, using the royal architecture as a weapon. The fifth guard wove Kido at levels beyond normal Shinigami comprehension. Forbidden spells that shortened lifespan but delivered reality-warping power, Izuku stood in the center of their combined assault and smiled. Impressive. This is the most coordinated attack I've faced since my original imprisonment. But you're still thinking three-dimensionally. Is still operating within systems I've transcended. Let me show you what exists beyond your framework. He pointed at the white-haired leader. Bankai, Kyōka Suigetsu, complete hypnosis of reality. The leader's ability to rewrite attack history shattered. His Bankai was predicated on understanding causality, on perceiving the timeline of events and editing them retroactively. But Kyōka Suigetsu's evolved form didn't just hypnotize perception, it hypnotized reality itself, making the universe believe that Izuku's attacks existed in all timelines simultaneously, that they were inevitable and had always been inevitable, that resisting them was logically impossible. The leader's Bankai failed. His mind couldn't process the contradiction. His power said the attacks never happened. Kyōka Suigetsu said they always happened, and the collision of incompatible truths caused his consciousness to simply stop. Brain shutting down from ontological overflow, he collapsed, unconscious before hitting the ground. Izuku turned to the crimson-haired woman. Hado number 99, Goryu Tenmetsu. 5 dragon-shaped columns of spiritual energy erupted from his fingertip, each one the size of a building, each one containing enough power to level cities. The woman's probability manipulation activated desperately, trying to make the attacks miss, trying to ensure 0% hit chance, but Izuku's Hogyoku-enhanced Kido operated on a level where probability became irrelevant. The attacks existed in a state beyond chance, beyond statistics, beyond the mathematical framework her Bankai employed. All 5 dragons hit simultaneously. The resulting explosion consumed half the throne room, and when it cleared, the woman was down, her twin blades shattered, her body barely breathing. 2 down. The armored giant roared, his infinite parallel selves converging on Izuku from every direction, from every timeline, from every possible angle. Millions of the same attack occurring simultaneously. Perfect coordination because they were literally the same, experiencing the same moment across different dimensional iterations. Izuku closed his eyes. Bakudo number 99, Kin. Black spiritual fabric erupted not from his body but from the space between dimensions itself, wrapping around every parallel instance of the armored giant simultaneously, binding all of them across all timelines with a single spell that existed in a superposition state, both cast and not cast, both successful and failed, collapsing only when observed into the outcome Izuku willed. Every parallel self was bound, every timeline instance paralyzed. And when Izuku opened his eyes and gestured, all the parallel selves collapsed into one, pulled back into prime reality where the armored giant stood confused and suddenly alone, his Bankai forcibly deactivated by spiritual pressure that outweighed his own by orders of magnitude. Hado number 88, Hiryu Gekizoku Shinten Raiho. The electrical beam vaporized the giant's armor and most of his torso. He fell, technically alive but functionally removed from combat, 3 down. The fourth guard, manipulating the palace's architecture, tried to weaponize the entire structure against Izuku, walls becoming blades, floors becoming quicksand, ceilings dropping with crushing force, the royal palace itself becoming a trap of impossible geometry designed to contain and destroy. Izuku raised both hands. The palace recognizes my authority. He didn't cast a spell, didn't use force, simply exerted his will, and the Hogyoku's power resonated with the Soul King's residual presence in the architecture, overriding the guard's manipulation through sheer existential dominance. The palace stopped attacking, walls returning to neutral position, floors solidifying, the architecture becoming passive as it acknowledged a new master. The fourth guard stared in horror as his Bankai became useless, his connection to the palace severed by Izuku's superior claim to authority. He drew his sealed Zanpakuto in desperate close combat attempt. Izuku caught the blade with his bare hand. Hado number 54, Hien. Purple flames consumed the guard's body in seconds, reducing him to ash before he could scream, 4 down. The fifth guard, the Kido Master, unleashed his ultimate technique, a combination of forbidden spells that required his own death to execute, sacrificing his life force to generate power that could theoretically destroy the palace itself, could theoretically kill even transcendent beings through sheer, overwhelming, destructive output. The spell manifested as a black sphere that consumed light, consumed matter, consumed everything it touched while expanding exponentially. Izuku watched it approach with clinical interest. Fascinating. You're using your soul as fuel, converting your existence directly into destructive energy. The mathematics are elegant. The commitment is admirable. And the power output is genuinely impressive. This would definitely kill me if I were still operating within the Shinigami framework. The sphere touched his transcendent form and stopped, simply stopped expanding, stopped consuming, stopped functioning. Because Izuku's Hogyoku enhanced existence operated on a level where even reality-destroying techniques became optional suggestions that required his consent to function. He reached out and touched the black sphere with one finger. It collapsed instantly, imploding into nothing, and the fifth guard's sacrificial technique failed completely, leaving him alive but powerless. Kneeling on the broken floor with tears streaming down his face because his ultimate attack, his death technique, his final desperate measure had been negated with casual ease. "I'm sorry," Izuku said, and he almost sounded genuine. "You fought well, all of you did, but you were protecting a system that's fundamentally broken, serving a god who's fundamentally passive, maintaining a status quo that's fundamentally stagnant. Your loyalty is admirable, your techniques are impressive, and your defeat was absolutely inevitable." He walked past the fifth guard, leaving him alive but broken, and approached the throne room's center where the Soul King waited in his crystal prison. The royal guard was defeated. The palace was secured. Nothing remained between Izuku Midoriya and godhood except the act itself, the absorption, the transformation, the final ascension that would elevate him beyond all previous existence. He stood before the crystal, looking at the being imprisoned inside. Humanoid but wrong, limbless, mutilated, maintained in perpetual stasis while his existence held reality together through sheer passive presence. The Soul King's eyes were vacant, unfocused, but as Izuku approached, they gained clarity for the first time in millennia. And in those eyes, Izuku saw everything. The history of the three worlds, the sacrifices made, the reasons for the current system, the necessity of balance. The Soul King spoke without speaking, thoughts transmitted directly into Izuku's mind. "You seek to replace me. But do you understand what that entails? I am not a king who rules, I am a linchpin who maintains. Every moment of every day, across all dimensions, I hold the boundaries between human world, soul society, and Hueco Mundo. I prevent them from collapsing into singular chaos. I maintain the cycle of souls. I balance creation and destruction. This is not power. This is imprisonment. This is eternal suffering for the sake of existence itself. Are you prepared for that burden?" Izuku's response was calm, certain. "I understand completely. And I'm prepared not just to bear that burden, but to evolve beyond it. You maintain balance through passive existence. I will maintain it through active will. You prevent collapse through stasis. I will prevent collapse through dynamic control. You are a prisoner of necessity. I will be a god of choice." He reached toward the crystal. "You were warned about this path once before, by Urahara, by Yamamoto, by everyone who understood what transcendence truly costs, and you ignored them because you believed you knew better. What makes you think this time will be different?" "Because this time I've already succeeded," Izuku replied. "Look at what I've accomplished. Infiltrated the world's most prestigious hero school without anyone suspecting my nature. Earned the trust and love of people who should have been able to see through my deception. Manipulated the symbol of peace himself into granting me the greatest power in that dimension. Defeated Soul Society's Royal Guard in under 5 minutes. I don't believe I know better. I've demonstrated it repeatedly through results that speak for themselves." His hand passed through the crystal as if it were made of water rather than solidified spiritual energy. The barrier that should have been impenetrable yielded to his touch because the Hogyoku granted him authority no mortal should possess. There's nothing left to say. The Soul King's thoughts carried something almost like relief. "I have maintained existence for long enough. If you believe you can do better, then prove it. Absorb me, take my power, become the new linchpin, and live with the consequences of your choice. Izuku's fingers touched the Soul King's chest. The moment of contact, reality stopped. Every dimension simultaneously froze, time becoming meaningless, space becoming optional. The fundamental laws of physics, suspending themselves as two beings, operated on a level where normal causality was inapplicable. Energy began flowing from the Soul King into Izuku. Not violently but steadily, a transfer of divine essence that human language had no adequate vocabulary to describe. Izuku felt everything. Every soul in every dimension became visible to him. Millions upon millions of lights representing conscious existence, each one connected to the system he was now inheriting, each one dependent on the balance he would maintain. He felt the boundaries between worlds, felt how thin they'd become, felt the constant pressure trying to collapse everything into chaotic singularity. He felt the weight of maintaining separation, of preserving the cycle, of ensuring that death and rebirth and purification continued functioning as designed. It was overwhelming. It was excruciating. It was perfect. The Soul King's body began to dissolve, his existence transferring completely into Izuku. Decades upon decades of accumulated divine power flowing like a river into an ocean. And as the transfer continued, Izuku evolved again, the Hogyoku triggering transformation beyond transcendence, beyond divinity, into something that had no name because no one had ever achieved it before. Final fusion. Divine Soul King form. His appearance became something that mortal eyes could barely process. His body remained humanoid, but gained qualities that suggested multiple existences overlapping, multiple versions of himself from different dimensions merged into singular unified being. His wings multiplied, 12 of them now, each one containing enough power to create or destroy universes. His eyes became windows into infinite possibility, kaleidoscopes that perceived every timeline simultaneously. His spiritual pressure became so overwhelming that it stopped being measurable and simply became omnipresent fact. Everywhere, always, eternal. The crystal prison shattered. The Soul King's essence was gone, fully absorbed, leaving nothing behind but empty space where a god had existed. And in that space, Izuku stood transformed, evolved, ascended beyond all previous limitations into something that qualified as genuine divinity. Not the limited godhood of Shinigami, not the pretend transcendence of holification, but actual cosmic authority over reality itself. He looked at his hands, energy crackling between fingers, each spark containing enough power to vaporize solar systems. He felt the three worlds connected to him, felt every boundary, every soul, every aspect of existence now under his direct authority. The weight was immense. The responsibility was crushing, and he smiled. Because this was what he'd been seeking since before his reincarnation, since his first attempts to transcend in soul society, since the moment he'd understood that power without authority was meaningless, and authority without power was theatrical. He had both now. Unlimited power, absolute authority, perfect control. The throne is claimed, he said, his voice echoing across all dimensions simultaneously. The old king is gone. The new order begins now. He extended his will across the three worlds, and reality responded. In the human world, the MHA universe where heroes and villains fought their petty battles, spiritual pressure descended like atmosphere at ocean depth. Every person felt it simultaneously, a presence in their minds that communicated absolute authority without requiring words. Quirks began to harmonize, the chaotic mutations stabilizing as Izuku's will imposed order on what had been random genetic expression. Crime rates dropped instantly as violent intent was passively suppressed by divine pressure that made aggression physically uncomfortable. Heroes and villains both found themselves unable to act against the greater system, their choices constrained not through force but through fundamental alteration of what actions felt possible. Uraraka collapsed in the UA dormitory, feeling Izuku's presence in her mind, inescapable, undeniable, absolute. He did it, she whispered. He actually became a god. In Soul Society, the Seirete, where Shinigami had governed the afterlife for millennia, the Gotei 13's captains felt reality shift beneath them like tectonic plates. The corrupt noble families found their political power suddenly meaningless as divine authority superseded temporal hierarchies. The divisions were restructured instantly, not through negotiation or gradual reform, but through immediate implementation of new systems that valued competence over lineage, strength over politics, efficiency over tradition, Captain Commander Yamamoto stood in his office, thousand-year-old eyes staring at the ceiling as if he could see through it to the palace above. And for the first time in his impossibly long existence, he felt genuine despair. We failed. We couldn't stop him, and now reality itself serves his will. In Hueco Mundo, the eternal desert where hollows dwelled in endless hunger, chaos was forcibly ordered. The predator-prey cycle that had defined existence for spirits was restructured into hierarchy with purpose rather than randomness. Powerful hollows found themselves elevated, granted authority and consciousness beyond their natural development. Weak hollows were purified or integrated into the new system. The wasteland that had been defined by meaningless suffering was transformed into structured domain where even monsters served function in the greater design. The transformation took 6 seconds. 6 seconds to rewrite reality across 3 dimensions, to implement new rules to establish order where chaos had reigned. And when it was complete, Izuku stood in the Soul King's palace, his palace now, and surveyed his creation with satisfaction of an artist who'd finally completed their masterpiece. Perfect order, he whispered. No more random violence, no more meaningless suffering, no more chaos masquerading as freedom. Just clean, efficient hierarchy with me at the apex, ensuring the system functions as intended. He turned his attention toward the human world, specifically toward UA, where his former classmates huddled in fear and confusion and made a decision. They deserve closure. They deserve to understand what they witnessed, and I deserve the satisfaction of showing them exactly how thoroughly they were outplayed. He opened a portal, not Senkaimon, not traditional spiritual gateway, but a door carved from reality itself, connecting his throne room directly to UA's main campus. He stepped through, and the final confrontation began. Izuku emerged from the portal onto UA's front lawn just as dawn broke over Tokyo, his divine form too overwhelming for normal perception, forcing itself down into something approaching his previous appearance, just so mortal eyes could process his presence without immediately going insane. He still glowed with inner light. His 12 wings were still visible as shadows that moved independently of his body. His spiritual pressure was still crushing. But he looked enough like the Izuku Midoriya they'd known that recognition was possible, and that made the revelation even more devastating. Every hero in Japan had gathered at UA. Every student, every teacher, every pro who could still stand after the chaos of dimensional barriers collapsing. They'd assembled for final confrontation, for desperate last stand, for whatever slim hope remained of stopping him before he achieved his goal. They looked up at him descending from the portal, and hope died. Because he wasn't approaching. He was already there. Already ascended. Already transformed. The battle they'd prepared for was over before they could raise their fists. All Might stood at the front of the assembled force in his skeletal form, tears streaming down his face, hands trembling. Izuku, my boy, what have you done? I've become what I was always meant to be, Izuku replied gently, descending until he stood on the grass, face to face with his former mentor. The question isn't what I've done, Toshinori. It's what you allowed me to do by being exactly the kind of broken, lonely hero I needed you to be. All Might flinched as if struck. Endeavor stepped forward, flames blazing despite the futility. You've conquered dimensional barriers. Fine. You've absorbed godlike power. Fine. But you haven't conquered us. We're still here, still fighting, and we'll never stop trying to free humanity from your tyranny. Izuku looked at Endeavor with something approaching pity. Free them? Enji Todoroki, your entire career has been defined by failures you desperately tried to compensate for through power. You abused your family trying to create the perfect hero. You ignored your son Tuya until he literally burned himself to death and returned as a villain. You failed at everything except accumulating strength, and now you stand before actual divine power and still believe your flames matter. They don't. You don't. You're a cautionary tale I'll use when explaining to future generations why the old system needed to be destroyed. Endeavor's flames guttered. His face went pale. Because every word was true, and divine certainty made the truth unbearable. Class 1A stood together, those who could still stand after days of psychological trauma. Bakugo was at the front. hands crackling with explosions, expression caught between fury and despair. I don't care how powerful you got, Deku. I don't care if you're a god or a demon or whatever the fuck you are now. I'm still going to kill you. He launched himself forward with everything he had, explosions propelling him with strength accumulated through desperate training, technique perfected through sleepless nights, rage focused into singular purpose. His fist burned with maximum output, enough power to level buildings aimed directly at Izuku's face. Izuku caught the punch with one hand. The explosion detonated against his palm and simply stopped. Energy absorbed into his divine form without leaving a mark, without making him move, without accomplishing anything except demonstrating the futility of resistance. Bakugo Katsuki, Izuku said softly, holding the boy's fist in his grip. You've trained hard, pushed yourself beyond normal limits, developed techniques specifically designed to counter what you know of my abilities. And still, your strongest attack is irrelevant. Do you understand now? This isn't about effort or determination or willpower. This is about fundamental existence. You're human. I'm divine. The gap cannot be bridged. Bakugo's eyes filled with tears of rage and helplessness. I'll never stop trying. I know, Izuku released his fist and stepped back. And that's why I'll let you live. You'll spend the rest of your existence as a warning to others, the boy who tried to punch God and learned what futility truly means. He turned to address the entire assembled force. I'm not here to fight you. Fighting would imply uncertainty about the outcome. I'm here to explain what happens next, so there's no confusion, no false hope, no desperate plans that waste resources you'll need for adapting to the new system. He raised one hand, and above him, a holographic display manifested from spiritual energy, showing the three worlds, showing the barriers between them, showing the new structure he'd implemented. The dimensional boundaries have been permanently restructured. Human world, Soul Society, and Hueco Mundo are now connected under unified authority, my authority. Chaos has been eliminated. Random violence has been suppressed. Quirks have been harmonized. The cycle of reincarnation has been optimized. Every aspect of existence now operates according to efficient design rather than evolutionary randomness. The display shifted, showing new hierarchies, new systems, new rules. For those who cooperate, your lives will improve dramatically. Crime will disappear, villain attacks will cease. Suffering will serve purpose rather than being meaningless. You will have stability, safety, order. All it costs is your absolute obedience to the systems I've implemented. Another shift, showing what happened to resistors. For those who resist, you will not be killed. Death is wasteful. You will be adjusted. Your memories edited through Kyōka Suigetsu, your loyalties rewritten, your free will constrained to acceptable parameters. You will serve the new order willingly, or you will serve it unwillingly, but you will serve. Silence fell across the assembled heroes. No one spoke because there was nothing to say. He'd presented the situation with perfect clarity. Obey or be enslaved, cooperate or be reprogrammed, accept or be adjusted. Uraraka stepped forward, tears streaming, voice breaking. Deku-kun, I loved you. I really, truly loved you. Was any of it real? Was there any part of you that felt anything at all? Izuku looked at her, and for a moment, just one moment, his expression softened into something that might almost have been Midoriya's gentle smile. I'm going to answer that question honestly because you deserve closure. The answer is no. Nothing was real. Every smile, every blush, every kind word was calculated performance designed to establish trust and affection that I could exploit. I felt nothing for you except acknowledgement that your emotions were useful. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see her reflection in his kaleidoscope eyes. But I understand that answer is unbearable, so let me offer mercy. He raised his hand toward her face. I can edit your memories, make you forget you ever loved me, make you forget the betrayal, make you wake up tomorrow believing Izuku Midoriya died heroically at the training camp and you mourned him appropriately and moved on. The pain will disappear, the trauma will vanish, you'll be free of this crushing weight. All you have to do is consent. Uraraka stared at his hand, at the offer of escape from agony, at the chance to forget everything and return to normalcy. Her mind screamed to accept, to take the easy way out, to let divine power erase what human resilience couldn't process. No, she whispered. Izuku's hand paused. No, I won't forget. I won't let you take this from me. Her voice gained strength despite the tears. You took everything else. You took my trust, my love, my understanding of reality. But I won't let you take my memories. Even if they hurt, even if they haunt me forever, they're mine. The pain is mine, and I choose to keep it. For the first time since his ascension, Izuku looked genuinely surprised. That's remarkably stupid. You're choosing suffering over peace, trauma over healing. Why? Because it's my choice, Uraraka replied. You took my agency away through manipulation, but this, accepting or refusing your edit, this is the only real choice I have left. And I'm choosing to remember. I'm choosing to hurt. Because that hurt proves I existed as something more than your puppet. It proves I was real, even if you weren't. Silence. Then Izuku lowered his hand, and something almost resembling respect crossed his features. Very well. Keep your pain, keep your memories, keep your trauma. It changes nothing about the outcome, but it demonstrates admirable will. Perhaps in the new order, that will can serve useful purpose. He stepped back, addressing the crowd again. You have 1 week to make your choices. Pledge loyalty to the new system, or resist and be adjusted. There is no third option. The age of heroes is over. The age of order has begun, and whether you embrace it willingly or are forced to embrace it makes no difference to me. He turned toward his portal. I'll be in the Soul King's palace if anyone wishes to formally surrender. The coordinates are visible to anyone with sufficient spiritual awareness. Present yourself respectfully and you'll be granted audience. Attack and you'll be reminded why gods don't fear mortals. He started to step through. Wait! All Might's voice, broken and desperate. The skeletal man stumbled forward, reaching toward Izuku with trembling hands. Please, if there's any part of you that remembers the boy I trained, if there's any part of you that cared even a little, please stop this. You don't have to rule through fear. You could rule through love, through inspiration, through everything I tried to teach you about being a symbol of peace. Izuku stopped at the portal's threshold, looked back at All Might, at the broken symbol who'd given him everything and received betrayal in return. You taught me many things, Toshinori. How to smile while hiding pain. How to inspire hope in hopeless situations. How to carry the weight of responsibility even when it crushes you. I learned all those lessons perfectly, but I also learned something you never intended to teach. Symbols are lies. Peace maintained through individual heroics is unsustainable, and love is the most dangerous weakness humans possess because it makes you exploitable. He stepped through the portal. Thank you for one for all. Thank you for your trust. And thank you for demonstrating why the old system needed to die. The portal closed. Izuku was gone. And on UA's front lawn, hundreds of heroes stood in silence, processing the undeniable fact that they'd lost completely, that their world had been conquered not through war, but through manipulation so perfect they'd never realized they were being conquered until it was already complete. All Might collapsed to his knees, sobbing openly, the symbol of peace finally and irrevocably broken. Around him, students and teachers and heroes all processed their own trauma in their own ways. Some crying, some silent, some screaming, some simply standing in shock, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Bakugo punched the ground until his knuckles shattered, then kept punching because physical pain was easier to bear than emotional devastation. Uraraka sat down on the grass and stared at the sky where the portal had been. Her decision to keep her memories already feeling like a weight she wasn't sure she could carry. And across the world, across 3 dimensions in millions of minds, the same thought echoed with the certainty of divine truth. It's over. We lost. And there's nothing left to do but surrender to the new order and pray we survive what comes next. 1 week passed. Izuku sat on his throne in the Soul King's palace, maintaining the boundaries between dimensions with barely a fraction of his attention. The divine responsibility that had consumed his predecessor, requiring such minimal effort from his transcendent form that he could simultaneously manage it while restructuring the entire 3 worlds' social, political, and spiritual systems. The palace had been redesigned to reflect his aesthetic, minimalist, elegant, overwhelming in its perfect geometry. No wasted space, no unnecessary ornamentation, just pure functional beauty that communicated absolute authority to anyone who entered. Representatives began arriving on the second day. First came the pragmatists, Heroes who understood that resistance was futile and cooperation was survival, who'd done the mathematics and realized that divine authority backed by cosmic power was not something mortal effort could overcome. They entered the throne room, knelt without being asked, and pledged their service to the new order. Izuku granted them positions in the restructured hierarchy based on competence rather than previous rank, creating a meritocracy that rewarded efficiency and loyalty above all else. Then came the idealists who still believed negotiation was possible. Heroes who thought maybe they could appeal to Izuku's better nature, convince him to moderate his approach, find some compromise between total control and complete chaos. He listened to their arguments patiently, explained with perfect clarity why their proposed solutions were fundamentally flawed, then offered them the same choice everyone received: serve willingly or be adjusted to serve unwillingly. Most chose service. A few chose adjustment. None left the palace without pledging loyalty, because leaving without pledging was impossible. The palace itself had become extension of Izuku's will, and departing required his permission, which would not be granted to potential resistors. On the fourth day, Class 1A arrived as a group. They walked into the throne room together, those who could still walk, and found Izuku sitting on a throne that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space, wearing robes that shifted between material and energy depending on viewing angle, his 12 wings spread behind him like a divine halo, his expression serene and completely untouchable. My former classmates, he greeted them with a smile that was neither cruel nor kind, just acknowledging. I wondered when you'd come. Took longer than I predicted, which suggests my estimates of your psychological resilience were conservative. Interesting. Ida stepped forward as unofficial spokesperson, his usual rigid posture maintained through sheer force of will despite obvious exhaustion. Midoriya-kun, we've come to discuss terms. There are no terms, Izuku replied calmly. There's only the choice I offered everyone: serve or be adjusted. Have you made your decision? We want to understand first, Momo said, her analytical mind still trying to find some logical framework that made this bearable. What exactly do you mean by adjusted? You mentioned memory editing through Kyōka Suigetsu, but what does that entail? Permanent alteration? Temporary modification? Complete personality replacement? Izuku gestured, and holographic displays manifested around the throne room showing different levels of adjustment. The extent depends on resistance level. Mild resistors might only need their loyalty edited. Memories remain intact, but their motivation for opposing me is replaced with motivation for serving me. Moderate resistors require more extensive editing, entire belief systems restructured, core values realigned, personal identities maintained but recontextualized. Severe resistors might need complete personality reconstruction. The original person effectively dies and is replaced with someone whose entire existence is built around serving the new order. The class stared at the displays in horror. This wasn't just mind control, this was murder through identity destruction. But I prefer willing service, Izuku continued. Adjusted servants are less creative, less capable of independent problem solving, less useful for complex tasks. They're adequate for basic positions, but not for the elite ranks I'm constructing. So I offer genuine choice. Pledge loyalty now while your minds are intact, and you'll retain full agency within the new system's parameters. Resist further, and I'll adjust you to the minimum level necessary for compliance. Todoroki spoke for the first time since entering, his voice carefully controlled. At the sports festival, you told me to use my fire, to surpass my father with all my strength. Was that manipulation or genuine advice? Both, Izuku replied. I wanted you to use your fire because it advanced my narrative of being an insightful, caring classmate. But the advice itself was tactically sound. You limiting yourself out of spite was objectively stupid. I manipulated your emotional triggers to achieve my goals, but the outcome genuinely improved your combat effectiveness. Most of my deceptions followed that pattern. True advice delivered for false reasons. That doesn't make it better, Todoroki said quietly. I never claimed it did. I'm explaining methodology, not seeking forgiveness. Silence fell. The classmates looked at each other, communicating through glances what words couldn't convey. They discussed this for days, argued themselves hoarse trying to find alternatives, and ultimately arrived at the same conclusion. They had no power here, no leverage, no options except the ones Izuku provided. Ida straightened his posture. We'll serve. All of us. Willingly. But we have one request. I don't negotiate, Izuku said, but I'll hear your request. Leave our memories intact, all of them. Don't edit our recollections of who you were, what you did, how thoroughly you deceived us. We want to remember. We want the pain and betrayal and trauma to remain clear. Because if we're going to serve you, we're going to do it knowing exactly what you are, not under the delusion that you're something better. Izuku studied them for a long moment, kaleidoscope eyes seeing deeper than surface expressions, perceiving their motivations and calculations with divine clarity. You're choosing to remember because you believe the pain will armor you against future manipulation. You think if you keep the betrayal fresh in your minds, you won't fall for similar deceptions again. That's sound reasoning. Flawed, but sound. Flawed how? Momo asked. Because remembering my previous deception doesn't prevent me from executing new ones. You'll just be traumatized while I manipulate you through different vectors. But the request is interesting enough that I'll grant it. Keep your memories, serve while knowing exactly what I am. It won't change the outcome, but it demonstrates the kind of will I value in my elite servants. He stood from his throne, descended the steps, and approached them. Kneel. They knelt, all 15 of them, heads bowed, pride swallowed, choices made. Izuku walked among them, placing one hand on each student's head in turn, establishing spiritual connection that formalized their service. Not hypnosis, not adjustment, just acknowledgement that they'd pledged loyalty and that breaking such pledge would result in consequences they couldn't survive. When he reached Bakugo, who was shaking with suppressed rage even while kneeling, Izuku paused. You hate me more than any of them. Yes, Bakugo growled through clenched teeth. Good. Hate is powerful motivation. I'll use you for positions where that rage can be channeled productively. You'll hunt down resistors in the human world, bring them here for adjustment or elimination, and every person you capture will remind you why you couldn't save them from me. Bakugo's hands clenched into fists hard enough to make his palms bleed. But he didn't attack, didn't explode, just endured the humiliation because Kirishima and the others were here, and attacking would mean their adjustment. Izuku moved to Uraraka last. She still looked broken, still showed signs of the psychological trauma his revelation had caused, but her eyes were clear, determined. You chose to remember your love, Izuku said softly. That's going to hurt worse than anything else. Every day you serve me, you'll remember what you felt. Every time you see me, you'll remember the boy you loved who never existed. Are you certain you want that burden? Yes, Uraraka replied, voice steady despite tears. I want to remember. I want the pain. Because someday, maybe not today, maybe not this year, maybe not this lifetime, but someday you'll make a mistake. Someday your perfect plans will have a flaw. And when that moment comes, I want to be there. I want to remember why I'm watching for that opening. I want my love turned to hate to be the thing that finds the crack in your armor. For the first time since becoming divine, Izuku felt something unexpected. Genuine intrigue. This girl, this sweet, compassionate hero student whose entire character was defined by kindness and optimism, had transformed her heartbreak into patient vengeance. She'd chosen trauma as a weapon. That was fascinating. Very well, he said, placing his hand on her head. Keep your love, keep your hate, keep your hope that I'll fail. It won't happen, but the determination is admirable enough that I'll allow you to maintain it. Who knows, perhaps your watch for my mistakes will make you more observant than those who simply accept my perfection. He returned to his throne, looking down at the kneeling Class 1A. Rise. You're now part of my elite guard, the first generation of servants who know exactly what they're serving and choose it anyway. You'll maintain order in the human world, enforce the new systems, demonstrate to others that cooperation is preferable to resistance. Disappoint me, and adjustment will follow. Excel, and you'll rise in the hierarchy. Those are your options. They stood, no longer classmates, no longer heroes in training, now servants of divine authority, whether they wanted to be or not. As they left the throne room, Bakugo looked back once, expression promising future violence that would never arrive. Uraraka didn't look back, just walked forward with shoulders straight and eyes dry, her pain private now. her vengeance patient, and Izuku watched them go with satisfaction of a chess grandmaster who just converted the opponent's most powerful pieces into his own pawns. 1 month passed under the new order. The human world transformed rapidly, cities reorganizing according to efficient design, crime rates approaching zero, as spiritual pressure passively suppressed violent intent, quirk-based discrimination eliminated through forced harmony of abilities. People adapted because humans always adapted when survival required it. And while many mourned the lost freedom, more found themselves relieved to live without fear of random villain attacks, without chaos masquerading as liberty. Soul Society's restructuring was more dramatic. The Gote 13 was dissolved and rebuilt from foundation. Corrupt noble families stripped of unearned authority, power concentrated in a meritocratic hierarchy where competence determined rank. Shinigami who resisted were adjusted. Those who cooperated found themselves with more genuine influence than the old system ever provided. The Seirete became efficient rather than theatrical, functional rather than traditional, and while some mourned the lost culture, more recognized that the culture had been built on inequality and exploitation. Huecomundo's transformation was most complete. The wasteland of meaningless suffering became structured domain, where even hollows served purpose, where predation was channeled into useful functions, where chaos was forced into patterns that benefited the greater system. Powerful hollows were elevated into a spada and granted consciousness. Weaker ones were purified or integrated, and the Eternal Desert became the New Order's enforcement arm. Monsters who once threatened all existence, now serving as divine authorities' shock troops. Izuku maintained all of it from his throne with barely a fraction of attention. His divine consciousness split across multiple simultaneous tasks, while his primary focus worked on deeper problems. Optimizing the soul cycle, refining the dimensional barriers, identifying and eliminating inefficiencies in reality's fundamental structure. The work was endless, consuming, exactly what the Soul King had warned about: eternal maintenance, constant vigilance, divine imprisonment through absolute responsibility. But unlike his predecessor, Izuku didn't suffer from it. He'd prepared for this burden across lifetimes, understood what it entailed, and had transcended human needs for rest or variation. He was perfectly suited for eternal administration because he'd shed everything that made maintenance unbearable: emotions, attachments, the desire for anything beyond perfect order, or so he told himself. On the 31st day of his reign, Izuku sat on his throne and felt something he hadn't experienced since Ascension: boredom. Not the boredom of having nothing to do. He had infinite tasks, endless optimizations, constant adjustments to make. But the boredom of knowing exactly how every scenario would play out, of having perfect information and an overwhelming power that made all outcomes predetermined. He could see the future with divine clarity, could predict every resistance before it occurred, could calculate every variable in the complex equation of existence. And it was tedious. He'd won completely, achieved total victory, claimed the throne and restructured reality according to his vision. And now, nothing. No challenges remained. No meaningful opposition existed. No surprises were possible because his omniscient perspective had eliminated uncertainty. This was why the previous Soul King had been content to exist as a limbless prisoner, Izuku realized. Not because he lacked the will to do more, but because doing more was pointless when you could see every consequence before you acted, when every choice was just selecting between predetermined paths. He felt something dark and cold settling into his divine consciousness. Not quite regret, not quite despair, but something approximating existential understanding that transcendence came with costs he hadn't fully appreciated until achieving it. A portal opened in his throne room without permission. Izuku's attention snapped to it immediately, annoyance flaring because nothing should be able to access his dimension without his consent. But then he saw who was emerging, and annoyance became interest. Uraraka Ochako stepped through the portal alone, wearing the elite guard uniform he'd designed, elegant, efficient, marking her as one of his servants. But her expression wasn't the broken despair he'd seen a month ago. It was determined, focused, sharp, with purpose. "You're not supposed to be able to open portals to this dimension," Izuku said, genuinely curious. "The palace is locked against unauthorized access. How did you bypass my restrictions?" "I didn't. Uraraka replied. You let me in, subconsciously. Your divine omniscience calculated that my arrival at this exact moment would be significant, so your power opened the path without your conscious awareness directing it. You're becoming what you feared, so powerful that your power makes choices for you, acting on perfect information before you consciously process the scenario. Izuku studied her with renewed interest. She'd been paying attention, learning how his divine consciousness operated, using that understanding to exploit mechanisms he hadn't realized were exploitable. Fascinating. You're correct. And you've come here for a reason. What do you want, Uraraka-san? She walked closer, stopping at the base of his throne, looking up at him with eyes that held something dangerous beneath the determination. I came to make you an offer. 1 month of service. 1 month of watching you maintain perfect order. 1 month of seeing you exercise absolute power, and I've realized something you probably already know, but are too proud to admit. Tell me what I already know, Izuku said, amused despite himself. You're bored, Uraraka said simply. You've won completely, achieved total victory, and now you're discovering that victory without challenge is just another kind of prison. You sit on that throne maintaining reality, and every second is the same, because you can predict every outcome, control every variable, eliminate every uncertainty. You've transcended humanity, but you've also transcended meaning. And that's killing you more thoroughly than any hero or Shinigami or villain ever could. Silence fell over the throne room. Izuku didn't respond immediately because she was right, uncomfortably, undeniably right, and admitting it felt like the first genuine surprise he'd experienced since Ascension. Continue, he said quietly. I can't defeat you through power, can't overthrow you through rebellion, can't even annoy you through resistance because you've predicted every possible opposition and neutralized it before it occurs. But I can offer you the one thing your divine omniscience can't provide: genuine uncertainty. She raised her hand, and spiritual energy flickered around her fingers. Not quirk power, not anything the human world should possess, but actual spiritual pressure that shouldn't be possible for someone who wasn't trained by Shinigami. Izuku leaned forward, interest becoming something stronger. You've been training with the Soul Society's techniques, learning Kido, developing spiritual awareness beyond what humans normally achieve. How long have you been preparing this? Since the day I pledged service. Every moment you weren't watching me directly, which is most moments, because even gods can't maintain perfect awareness of every servant simultaneously. I've been learning, studying, preparing. Not to defeat you. That's impossible, but to become interesting enough that you'd have a reason to pay attention. She took a step closer to the throne. I'm offering you a challenge. Not a fight, not a rebellion, a game. I'll spend the rest of my existence trying to find the theoretical flaw in your perfect system, the one variable you can't predict, the crack in reality's structure that even divine omniscience might miss. And you'll maintain your order while knowing that somewhere in your hierarchy is someone actively looking for your mistake. Izuku stared at her, processing the offer, calculating implications, and for the first time since becoming divine, he felt something beyond boredom, genuine curiosity about outcome. Because she was right about the fundamental problem. His power had eliminated uncertainty, but uncertainty was what made existence bearable. Without it, every day was just maintenance of predetermined results. You understand this changes nothing, he said carefully. Even if you find a theoretical flaw, even if you discover some crack in the system, I'll simply adjust for it and eliminate the weakness. Your game has no winning condition for you. I know, Uraraka replied, but it has a winning condition for both of us. I get to maintain hope that someday I'll find something you missed. You get to experience the uncertainty of not knowing if that hope is delusional or prophetic. We both get to exist with purpose beyond simple maintenance. Isn't that worth more than the alternative? Izuku considered her words, considered the offer, considered the implications of accepting. This was dangerous in ways she probably didn't fully understand. Giving a servant permission to actively search for systemic weaknesses, to question divine authority, to maintain hope of future resistance. That could destabilize the perfect order he'd worked lifetimes to construct, but the alternative was eternal boredom and divine prison of his own creation. Very well, he said finally. I accept your challenge. You will serve as my elite guard in the human world, while simultaneously searching for the flaw you believe exists. I will maintain perfect order while allowing that search to continue, and perhaps, one of us will find what we're looking for. She smiled then, not the bright, cheerful smile of the girl who'd loved Deku, but something sharper, more dangerous, more genuine. Thank you, Izuku. Or should I call you Soul King now? Call me whatever you wish, Izuku replied. Names are just labels. They don't change what I am. Then I'll call you by your true name, the one you've never spoken aloud but that I've figured out through observation and analysis. She met his kaleidoscope eyes with steady determination. Sōsuke Aizen, the traitor god who transcended death itself, who conquered a world through deception, who achieved absolute power and discovered it was another cage. That's who you really are. And now that I know your name, now that I understand what you truly are, the game begins. Izuku felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember, genuine emotion beyond clinical calculation. Not fear, not excitement exactly, something approaching anticipation. The game begins, he agreed. May we both find it more interesting than the alternative. Uraraka bowed formally, then turned and walked toward the portal, her steps confident, her purpose clear. As she reached the threshold, she paused and looked back one final time. I loved Izuku Midoriya, who never existed, but I'll spend my existence challenging Sōsuke Aizen, who does. Somehow that feels more honest than anything we had before. She stepped through the portal. It closed behind her. And Sōsuke Aizen, who had worn so many names, played so many roles, achieved so many impossible victories, sat on his throne in the Soul King's palace and smiled, not the Aizen smile of superior knowing, not the Midoriya smile of manufactured innocence, but something new, something genuine, something that acknowledged that perfection was just another word for stagnation, and that the most dangerous thing he could do was allow uncertainty back into his existence. Interesting, he whispered to the empty throne room. For the first time since Ascension, something interesting has occurred. Well played, Uraraka-san. Well played indeed. And so the eternal game began. Divine authority maintaining perfect order while being challenged by hope that refused to die. God and mortal locked in contest where neither could win but both could find meaning in the struggle itself. The throne of heaven was claimed, the new world was ordered, and the story that had begun with a boy manipulating a hero into giving him power ended with a god discovering that absolute victory was just the beginning of an even more complex deception. The lie had told himself that triumph without challenge could ever be satisfying. This was not the end. This was the beginning of eternity. And Sōsuke Aizen, who had transcended death, transcended dimensions, transcended reality itself, faced his greatest challenge yet: how to rule forever when forever stretched into meaningless infinity, unless someone gave him reason to care beyond simple maintenance. The answer walked through portals bearing hope, disguised as service. And the god on his throne welcomed that hope, because without it, divinity was just another word for prison. The eternal order had been established. Now came the eternal game. And both players understood that losing was impossible, victory was meaningless, and the only thing that mattered was that the game itself continued. Because the alternative was worse than death. It was boredom in paradise. And no god, no matter how powerful, how transcendent, how perfect, could survive that for long without going mad. The end. Or perhaps the true beginning.
Huge shout out to the absolute legends fueling the fire. You guys aren't just members, you're the heartbeat of this community. Thank you for believing in the vision and keeping the momentum at an all-time high. Pro heroes, the front line, the ones who step up and set the pace. These legends are the backbone of the operation. Dylan the Proud, DA, Fire 05. Symbols of peace, the pillars of the community. These titans bring the stability and the hype that keeps us standing tall through it all. Amuri B, Kenneth Ponteris, Neostar Productions, Asael Cardenas, Shaquan Simmons, Thunder, Elijah Saunders, Peter Hamilton, Freddie Rose, Omega, Toxic Rune, Chris Talley, Alexander Thompson, Remorsefuls, Black Vein, Joshua Hedrington, Aaron Abercrombie, Drift SK8er, Akeno Himejima, Corey Tokars, Jan, X0 Hope 3565, Devin Black, Crow, Roberto Ramos de Cristina, Dasher Games, Joe Bros, Ray Vaughn Crimson River, Dante Alaster, Adam Yonkers, Blood Saints, Donna Cafe, Zeph, KC, Howie 60, Ignacio, Albert. Hope of the universe, the ultimate defenders. These are the celestial tier legends whose support reaches beyond the stars. They are the final spark that lights up the dark. The Maniac 563, Sean Brooks, Keyshawn, Debbie Vo, LS Morningstar, Marl, Spintown, Greg Green, James, Kwan Yen Thompson, Kwan, Zeno KJ. And that's how you conquer reality while everyone's too stupid to notice. If this mindfuck of a story broke your brain in the best way, smash that subscribe button because we're just getting started with these what-if nightmares. Drop a comment telling me which hero you want destroyed next.